COVID-19 pandemiyasi O'zbekistonda amalga oshirilayotgan keng ko'lamli islohotlar uchun jiddiy to'siq bo'ldi. Pandemiya avjiga chiqqan paytda mamlakat rahbariyatining ustuvor vazifasi fuqarolar hayotini saqlab qolish, ularning sog'lig'i va farovonligini ta'minlash edi. Shu bilan birga COVID-19 pandemiyasi O'zbekistonni jadal rivojlantirish uchun burilish nuqtasi hamda mamlakat rivojlanish trayektoriyasini belgilaydigan yangi yo'nalish bo'lishi mumkin. 2019-yil oktyabrda Prezident Shavkat Mirziyoyev O'zbekistonning 2030-yilgacha yashil iqtisodiyotga o'tish strategiyasini tasdiqladi. Ushbu strategiya aholining arzon energiya ta'minotidan foydalanish imkoniyatini, qayta tiklanadigan energiya manbalari ulushini ko'paytirishni, elektr transportini rivojlantirishni, chiqindilarni qayta ishlashning ilg'or tizimini yaratishni va boshqa samarali chora-tadbirlarni nazarda tutadi. So'nggi yillarda mamlakatda yuz berayotgan o'zgarishlar buning yaqqol tasdig'idir. O'zbekistonda ekologik toza uy-joylar qurish loyihalari amalda joriy etilmoqda hamda ushbu dastur hukumat va mahalliy hokimiyat tomonidan moliyalashtirilmoqda. Barcha hududlarda yangi ish o'rinlari yaratilib, ayollar va yoshlarga alohida e'tibor qaratilmoqda. Mamlakatda yuqori malakali mutaxassislarni tayyorlash va raqamli iqtisodiyotda raqobatbardoshlikni oshirib, yopiq siklning sirkulyar iqtisodiyotiga o'tish uchun dastlabki shart-sharoitlar yaratilmoqda. O'zbekiston Orol dengizi muammolarini hal qilishga ham e'tibor qaratib, uni ekologik innovatsiyalar va texnologiyalar hududiga aylantirishga intilmoqda. Mamlakat rahbariyati yashil investitsiyalarni faol jalb qilmoqda. Buning tasdig'ini aholining zaif qatlamlari uchun yashil ipoteka dasturi misolida ko'rish mumkin. Mamlakatning yashil iqtisodiyotga o'tishi barqaror rivojlanish imkonini beradi. Qolaversa, iqlim o'zgarishi, yerlarning degradatsiyasini oldini olish, biologik va tabiiy ekotizimlarni saqlash bo'yicha xalqaro shartnomalarni amalga oshirishda o'z hissasini qo'shadi. Keling, birgalikda O'zbekistonni yanada obod qilish va yashnatish uchun barcha sa'y-harakatlarni birlashtiraylik.
Assalomu alaykum, hurmatli xonimlar va janoblar. Xush kelibsiz. Good afternoon, good morning, excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the International Forum, Building Forward Better, a COVID-19 Green Recovery for Uzbekistan. My name is Matilda Dimovska, resident representative of United Nations Development Programme in Uzbekistan, and I will be moderating the opening segment of the forum. The ground rules of the event were already shared. Please do select the language of your choice. The forum will be live streamed on YouTube channel, and the link is available on the events page. We have 300 registered attendees and 42 distinguished panelists. The forum is a joint undertaking. It is co-organized by the Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction, the Center of Hydrometeorological Services under the Cabinet of the Ministers of Uzbekistan, and the State Committee for Ecology and Environment Protection, together with the United Nations Development Programme, the delegation of the European Union to Uzbekistan, and the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. The theme that we will be discussing is green recovery in Uzbekistan. And we do hope that it will become this event that will become a milestone in the transition to green development of Uzbekistan. The world is in unprecedented times. It is facing a dual crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the climate change. COVID-19 demonstrated yet again that public health is linked to climate and the nature, but it also brought a historic opportunity and a global call to build forward better and to initiate a green recovery. And this means doing more than getting economies and livelihoods quickly back on their feet. For Uzbekistan, it means that it uses the opportunity to recover from the crisis and make strategic investments that decouple the economic recovery with increased emissions and build on behavioral change that was triggered during the COVID-19 outbreak. Over the next 2 days of the forum, we will be aiming to uncover where Uzbekistan stands in its recovery journey and how the government, businesses, civil society can partner and put in place new policies and incentives for green recovery. What recommendations and practical actions on building forward better can be made to support government of Uzbekistan in its green recovery efforts during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. We will be doing that during 4 sessions of the forum, and we will be informed by a policy brief that was prepared to feed the discussions. We will aim to summarize these recommendations into a statement of intent to be issued at the end of the forum. Let me now turn to the agenda. In recent years, the government of Uzbekistan, we have seen that was very actively stressing the importance of and prioritizing the green agenda. The Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction was at the forefront of developing the ambitious strategy for transitioning of Uzbekistan to a green economy and is leading its implementation. The ministry is also a key co-organizer of this forum. It is therefore my great pleasure to invite for opening remarks His Excellency Mr. Jamshid Kuchkarov, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction of Uzbekistan. Mr. Kuchkarov, you have the floor.
Микрофон, пожалуйста, да.
Thank you, Ms. Demovska, dear participants of the forum, Mrs. Eger, Mrs. Fraser. It's very nice to have you, all of you, in this forum. And let me welcome you to this forum dedicated to the issues of green recovery after COVID-19 in Uzbekistan. First, I would like to thank the UNDP representatives for their participation in the forum and for excellent organization of this event. I believe that this forum will serve as a unique platform to discuss the most effective solutions, ensuring further sustainable development during this pandemic, including through the active development of green economy in Uzbekistan. First of all, taking this opportunity, I would like to thank the United Nations Development Programme for its continuous support of the government in the appropriate development and effective implementation of projects on social protection of the population and inclusive and sustainable growth, poverty reduction, as well as addressing the wide spectrum of environmental and economic issues. In the context of climate change, interconnection of the problems and needs of peoples and countries becomes irreversible and extremely important to ensure efficient, resource-saving, and environmentally friendly economy. In particular, accelerated industrialization and growth of population are significantly increasing the demand for resources in economies and exacerbating the negative anthropogenic impact on the environment, leading to more GHG emissions. In this context, this forum is very important for Uzbekistan in promoting and implementing the strategy and policies of the country aimed at supporting climate change mitigation and adaptation under the framework of the strategy for the transition of the Republic of Uzbekistan to a green economy for 2019-2030 and Paris Climate Agreement commitments. As you know, countries Uzbekistan green strategy includes the following measures. First, increasing the energy efficiency of the economy and rational use of natural resources through technological modernization and development of relevant financial mechanisms. Introducing green criteria in the priority areas of public investment and spending based on the best international practice. Third, supporting the implementation of pilot projects related to transition to a green economy through the development of mechanisms of state incentives public-private partnerships, and enhancing cooperation with international financial institutions. Fourth, developing a system of training and retraining to build the capacity of personnel on labor markets for green economy through stimulating investments in education, strengthening cooperation with leading foreign education institutions and research centers. Fifth, adopting measures to mitigate the negative impact for the environmental crisis in the Aral Sea region. And last, strengthening international cooperation in the field of green economy. Ladies and gentlemen, this is main measures in our green strategy, but I would like to thank a very important moment of understanding green economy is that in our understanding, this is not new, many people know that we consider movement toward green economy as a way of stimulating economic growth. So we don't consider measures to green economy as an additional expenditure or declining effectiveness of projects or economy as a whole. We consider movement to green economy as a way of stimulating economic development on innovation-based and knowledge-based economy. So we think this would help us. And some people honestly consider that measure as additional expenditure or additional financial task for companies, for government. No, we don't think so. In this regard, also, I would like to note with satisfaction the launch during this year of a new joint project with UNDP towards a green recovery in Uzbekistan, which is aimed at promoting and facilitating the process of sustainable green development in the pilot districts of Karakal, Pakistan and Fergana Valley, to be implemented in 2021 and next year. I assure you that the government of Uzbekistan will remain on the course of further development of comprehensive cooperation with all international organizations and financial institutions in the transition to the green economy and the subsequent promotion of inclusive development in the sectors of the economy. We hope that the forum will set the stage for coordinated and effective dialogue between national and international stakeholders to support the government of Uzbekistan in the process of green recovery after COVID-19. In conclusion, let me once again thank UN and UNDP and all our partners for organizing this very good event, and in general for the practical assistance provided in carrying out structural reforms and innovative development of the economy of Uzbekistan. We hope for continuation of our fruitful and mutually beneficial cooperation with all UN agencies. Due to the scheduled conference call with the head of the country, I will have to leave the forum earlier. I'm very sorry. And I propose that Deputy Minister, Mr. Abdunazar Babur, would represent the ministry at plenary session. Thank you very much for your attention. And in the conclusion, I hope very soon we will talk face to face, which is honestly much better than talking through a computer monitor. Thank you. Please keep yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Your Excellency. And indeed, we all hope to meet in person and to have direct exchanges. Very much thanks for taking a time to address us. Your leadership to this topic will be essential for the success of it, and we will be counting on your support. Let me thank you very much. Let me now turn to another organizer of the event, the State Committee for Ecology and Environment Protection. We are delighted to have today with us Mr. Alisher Maksudov, the chairperson of the
Добрый день,
Goscom Ecology.
госпожа Димовская. Добрый день, уважаемые коллеги, дамы и господа. Дорогие участники форума, позвольте выразить благодарность всем за проявленный интерес участия в международном форуме, посвященной тематике зеленого восстановления в Узбекистане после пандемии коронавируса COVID-19. Следует отметить, что в период пандемии правительству Узбекистана в кратчайшие сроки удалось мобилизовать государственные и общественные ресурсы для принятия необходимых мер. Было обеспечено тесное скоординированное взаимодействие государственных органов, бизнеса и общественных организаций. Считаем, что для построения благополучного постковидного мира следует принять за основу восстановления принципа устойчивого развития и зеленой экономики. Необходима разработка и внедрение экологичных решений и подходов, способных обеспечить баланс социально-экономических и экологических аспектов устойчивого развития. Как никогда важно перейти к совместному рассмотрению и поиску решений сложных, связанных между собой социальных и экологических проблем. Нам предстоит обеспечить человеческое развитие в гармонии с природой. В связи с этим хотелось бы отметить важность принятия стратегии Республики Узбекистан по переходу к зеленой экономике, который предусматривает комплексный подход к решению социальных и экономических проблем с учетом изменения климата, последствий для окружающей среды и хрупких природных ресурсов. Уважаемые участники форума, как отметил генеральный секретарь ООН Антонио Гутерриш, зеленое восстановление после кризиса COVID-19 предполагает выбор более устойчивого пути развития, решение проблем изменения климата, защита окружающей среды, сохранение биоразнообразия, а также обеспечение здоровья и безопасности населения. Здесь следует подчеркнуть, что в октябре 2018 года ратифицировано Парижское соглашение по изменению климата. И вместе с тем разработана концепция охраны окружающей среды до 2030 года. Стратегия по сохранению биоразнообразия, а также стратегия по управлению твердыми бытовыми отходами. Важно отметить о проводимой политике в стране, направленной на сокращение выбросов парниковых газов в ключевых секторах экономики и улучшение экологической обстановки. Дорогие друзья, в заключение хотелось бы подчеркнуть, что принимаемые сегодняшние решения необходимо учитывать важность рационального использования и эффективного управления природными ресурсами и признание экономической ценности природы во всех секторах экономики. Также хотелось бы отметить, что сегодняшний форум совпал со Всемирным днем дикой природы, который отмечается ежегодно 3 марта. Пользуясь случаем, позвольте искренне поздравить вас, уважаемые участники форума, со Всемирным днем дикой природы и пожелать всем продуктивной, успешной работы и достижений в поставленной задаче в данном форуме. Благодарю вас за внимание. Большое спасибо, госпожа Матильда.
Thank you, Mr. Maksudov, and indeed, happy World Wild Nature Day to all of us. The role of Goscom Ecology is extremely important for the topic that we discuss, and we will rely on cooperation in the future. It is my pleasure to now invite for her opening remarks Ms. Olga Algayerova, United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. UNECE is increasingly active in Uzbekistan and recently conducted the third environmental performance review for Uzbekistan. Ms. Algayerova also personally participated in one of the meetings of the UNIFI's led COVID Socio-Economic Task Force and contributed to our work directly. Ms. Algayerova, the floor is yours.
Thank you, dear Matilda, for warm welcoming words. Your Excellency, Deputy Prime Minister Jamshid Kuchkarov, Your Excellency, Chairperson of the State Committee Alisher Maksudov, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. It's really my great pleasure to speak to you today about the opportunities for Uzbekistan to build back better from the COVID-19 pandemic. To begin, let me express my gratitude to government of Uzbekistan for the organization of this very important and timely event. I also thank the co-organizers, the Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction, the Center of Hydrometeorological Services under the Cabinet of Ministers of the Republic of Uzbekistan, and the State Committee for Ecology and Environment Protection, as well as UNDP, the EU Special Representative, and the European Union delegation in Uzbekistan. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in challenging times. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused unprecedented economic and social consequences for all countries. Governments have responded with concerted efforts to shore up public health systems and with social and economic response measures. However, COVID-19 has also demonstrated the consequences of a lack of resilience and preparedness to deal with such a pandemic. Unfortunately, we know that the risk of further pandemics is considerable. Climate change, water pollution, and the drivers of biodiversity loss, such as deforestation and habitat loss, may all cause similar issues in the future, and therefore both short-term and longer-term measures in countries' recovery plans should aim to deliver not only economic prosperity, but also to address pressing environmental challenges and improving environmental health. There are several key arguments for why governments should use this unique opportunity to focus on the transformation to low-emission, resource-efficient, resilient, and environmentally sustainable socio-economic development. The performance and resilience of our socio-economic systems depend on the health of the natural environment and ecosystems. Once the COVID-19 crisis is over, we cannot return to business as usual practices, which generate greenhouse gas emissions and harm wildlife and biodiversity. To recover from the COVID-19 crisis, we must put people at the center of our response. We must maintain a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment for everyone's well-being. Speaking recently on his priorities for 2021, the United Nations Secretary General said, recovery must be also sustainable, embracing renewable energy and green and resilient infrastructure. And such a recovery needs a coordinated response. The UN and the leaders of countries and international organizations have a joint responsibility to combine all our efforts. Coming to UNECE, we are strongly engaged at the regional and country levels to contribute to a response to COVID-19. UNECE provides a regional policy response through the work of the regional UN system and its 7 issue-based coalitions. Just recently, the issue-based coalition on environment and climate change issued a compendium of measures to green the post-pandemic recovery. This compendium provides guidance, tools, and practical examples for UN country teams to assist countries in integrating environmental and climate change into their recovery strategies. At the country level, we stand ready to help with our numerous tools, conventions, standards, and best practice recommendations, which are the product of collective intellectual input by the member states and the Secretariat. UNECE's contribution to address the crisis includes some instruments that were relevant in this initial emergency situation. Let's give me an example, such as implementation of the observatory of knowledge for border crossings, and the use of digital tools in trade and transport. We offer also tools that can be used to reduce risk and recover better. These include the use of UNEC multilateral agreements, standards, and statistical frameworks for informed decision-making and support to a green recovery, including by improved resource use and the promotion of the circular economy. Let me use this opportunity and to invite Uzbekistan to attend at ministerial level our Commission session on April 20 and 21, and to join all 56 member states in our regional effort, and to pronounce your national voluntary commitment on this so important topic as circular economy is. What is needed now are innovative solutions and how to put these instruments to work in the best interest of the countries of the region. And when we speak of innovative solutions, I would like to mention a topic which I always support. And again, it's circular economy. I believe that efforts to achieve a circular economy can make a significant contribution to sustainable recovery and towards achieving the SDGs. UNEC member states are also of this opinion, as they have decided to be at our Commission session. Let me conclude by insisting on the point we are telling building back better. I prefer recovering better, which should be at the center of every recovery strategy. We need to exploit the opportunities that this crisis brings to accelerate the implementation of the SDGs in the remaining decade of action. Measures to boost economic growth should be well aligned with the 2030 agenda. It is critical that they contribute to climate change mitigation by accelerating the deployment of clean energy and infrastructure. And such measures can contribute to the achievement of multiple SDGs, boosting employment, reducing air pollution, and improving health outcomes. And we all need to seize these opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you fruitful discussions and success in our common endeavors, and thank you for listening to me. Back to you, Matilda.
Thank you, Ms. Algayerova, and indeed we hope that this event will be a step in taking the opportunity for green development. Let me now turn to UNDP. UNDP is strongly committed to support green recovery in Uzbekistan. And we are delighted to be joined live from New York by Ms. Mirjana Spoljaric-Eger, UN Assistant Secretary General, UNDP Assistant Administrator, and Regional Director for Europe and CIS. Ms. Spoljaric is a strong supporter of UNDP's work on green development in the region and in Uzbekistan. Dear Mirjana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matilda, and dear Deputy Prime Minister, dear Chairperson. Good morning, Olga and colleagues. It's really a great pleasure to take part in this very important event for Uzbekistan. As much as a health crisis, the spread of COVID-19 is an economic, social, and environmental crisis, as we have heard. We will recover from it, but as often stated by the administrator, Achim Steiner himself, we must use this opportunity to build a more equal, inclusive, and sustainable and safer and healthier planet. UNDP has, since the early phase of the pandemic, as you well know, been supporting countries with COVID-19 socioeconomic impact assessments and response plans. We also soon rolled out a second generation of our COVID recovery offer, in which green economy and climate change action figures as a priority. This entails mainstreaming climate action in greening stimuli in the national recovery packages. It means, above all, investing in green and decent jobs, ending fossil fuel subsidies, putting a price on carbon, taking climate risks and resilience into account in recovery planning, and last but not least, leaving no one behind. On this greening path, we need to go beyond targeting standalone problems. Instead, we must be able to simultaneously grasp and steer interconnected social, governance, and environmental components. We have to learn how to think and work in systems instead of seeking solutions through individual projects. This is demonstrated in the recently released UNDP Human Development Report, The Next Frontier, Human Development and the Anthropocene. But it also constitutes the leitmotif, as we have heard, of UNDP's RLC program, which seeks to facilitate and promote sustainable investments in the region. We also heard in the opening statements that already before the pandemic, Uzbekistan adopted a comprehensive reform agenda to its green development, guided by the National Strategy on Transition to Green Economy. It includes specific targets on reducing emissions by increasing energy efficiency, greater use of renewable energy, improving water efficiency and crop yields while maintaining the quality of land. Today, as Uzbekistan recovers from the immediate fallout of the COVID-19 outbreak, it is very encouraging to see the emphasis placed by the leadership of the country on promoting green recovery driven by innovation and systems thinking. There are three broad areas UNDP considers particularly important with regard to green recovery for Uzbekistan: investing in green jobs and achieving a just transition. Second, a more responsible use of natural and water resources and ecosystems. And third, greater energy efficiency, diversification of energy sources away from fossil fuels, as well as enhanced land use. Ultimately, we will need to ensure that climate change and the use of natural resources do not impose limits on future growth prospects, undermine progress made in poverty reduction, and adversely impact food security of Uzbekistan. For today's forum, jointly with the government, UNDP prepared a policy brief to initiate a discussion on green recovery and to identify ways in which comparative strengths and resources of international partners could be strategically utilized to support Uzbekistan to integrate green economy into national and sectoral development plans. I am confident that this forum will further shape our collective efforts and provide impetus to the green development agenda in the country. And in closing, I would like to thank the government of Uzbekistan and all participants of this forum for the long-standing partnership and close cooperation. I look forward to the discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mirjana. It is now my pleasure to invite for opening remarks Mr. Peter Burian, EU Special Representative for Central Asia, joining us from Brussels. Mr. Burian has done tremendous efforts to promote regional cooperation, such as regional water and energy dialogue, climate change, as well as addressing the consequences of the RLC crisis. Mr. Burian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matilda, and best greetings from Brussels, very sunny Brussels. And when I see the sunny weather and 1 meter of snow in Texas and sunny weather here in Brussels, I think the climate change is real. Nobody can argue about it and so on. So we like it, but once again, great to see you all online. I would love to see you in person in Tashkent, but at least this kind of communication is allowing us to tackle many important issues together. And indeed, it's really a very much a pleasure for me to participate in this very important forum and discuss support for green post-COVID-19 recovery of Uzbekistan. And I commend you, our colleagues from UNDP, who really came with this very timely and important initiative. And unfortunately, the implications of COVID-19 crisis have reminded us that there is no room for delays in implementation of sustainable development strategies, sustainable development goals, and structural reforms. And in this context, I'm pleased to note that the wide reform drive and process launched by Uzbekistan has very much continued also during difficult times of pandemic as well as regional cooperation. And this is something I want to highlight. This regional cooperation under leadership of Uzbekistan is very much important, I believe, for tackling existing challenges together in a spirit of regional togetherness and solidarity. And once again, we appreciate those initiatives of Uzbekistan and its leadership, involving also Afghanistan into wider regional cooperation, since no country alone is able to tackle existing challenges, and in particular impact of climate change. So I believe one of the worst consequences of pandemic would be if we diverted our attention and weaken our focus from the impact of climate change and other aspects of sustainable development and focus on short-term fixes of problems created by the pandemic. Of course, it's very important to address grievances of people, but once again, we cannot forget and invest even more efforts into green and sustainable recovery. Implementation of SDGs, as well as mitigation and adaptation to climate change through innovation and new technologies, transition to green economy should become key elements for sustainable recovery. And in this regard, I very much welcome ambitious initiative of President Mirziyoyev for turning the RRC region into a zone of ecological innovation. As you remember, we visited together Karakalpakstan, and we visited it several times, and I have seen what can be done in a rather short period of time to this end when proper resources and timely efforts are mobilized and underpinned by bold decisive action and leadership at the domestic level, of course, with vital support of donors and international organizations. I believe this is a great model to follow and possibly replicate also in other areas. And the new EU strategy, I would like to underline, on Central Asia strongly supports these initiatives and objectives. Green and sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 crisis has been also one of the key topics discussed during the last EU Central Asia ministerial meeting and online EU Central Asia Economic Forum, with the participation of Deputy Prime Ministers of Central Asian countries, including Deputy Prime Minister Umuzakov last December. And we agreed during the discussion that recovery from COVID-19 crisis should not compromise on our common environmental ambitions, but should rather be a catalyst for transition to green, low carbon and circular economies, responsible and sustainable use and management of natural resources. And we believe green recovery is not only possible, but also economically sensible, because the cost of inaction is much higher. And as Deputy Prime Minister Kuchkarov mentioned, there is no contradiction between transition to low carbon economies, low emission green economy and economic growth. And we tested this approach also on our own experience. And having said that, of course, nothing will happen without mobilization of sufficient financial and human resources in all sectors. At the beginning, the transition to green and low emission economy requires significant investment, but it is very soon compensated by even more significant savings, competitiveness, and better quality of life, among other benefits. And those who will be able to manage climate transitions well, I believe, will be the winners and will become more competitive and sustainable in their economic and trade activities. And by bringing forward the European Green Deal and new digital agenda, we see great possibilities for close cooperation with our Central Asian partners. These opportunities will be discussed also in the follow-up to Economic Forum in December, hopefully in person in Bishkek in July. And in this context, also we'll be focusing on further alignment of our strategies, legal and regulatory frameworks, and improvement of business climate and investment environment, which I believe will allow us to do even more together. And last but not least, the new enhanced partnership and cooperation agreement between EU and Uzbekistan, which is being finalized these days, will provide, I believe, a very strong legal basis for moving our cooperation even to a higher and new qualitative level. And finally, we all should follow an inclusive approach. In this regard, we encourage participation and close cooperation with civil society and representatives of most vulnerable groups of society, youth and women, as agents of change, in particular in the process of recovery. And once again, EU Central Asia Civil Society Forum, which is another platform for interregional dialogue, will discuss the role of civil society in green recovery soon in Almaty. To conclude, allow me to reconfirm once again EU's readiness to strengthen our partnership with Uzbekistan for a sustainable green recovery. And I look very much forward to your suggestions how we, international organizations and donors, can work even closer to support national ownership and leadership of Uzbekistan in green recovery. Thank you once again for including me.
Thank you, Mr. Burian, for such a comprehensive statement. And indeed, one of the intentions of the forum is to result with a joint understanding and kind of alliance of a platform of all of us, the government and the international actors, about how we can best support and catalyze carbon-less, free development companies, and is catalyzed by the recovery from the COVID. Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Marietta Jager, Deputy Director General at the European Commission's Directorate General for International Partnerships. The Directorate is working with partner countries around the world and in Uzbekistan to achieve sustainable development and jointly find solutions for global challenges. Among other, Uzbekistan benefits from the EU support to tackle the climate change and environmental challenges in a number of sectors. I invite Mr. Jager to take the floor. Ms. Jager.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Deputy Prime Minister's Excellencies, honorable guest. It's a real pleasure and privilege to participate in this forum. And I really thank you for having me, and thank you to Uzbekistan government for organizing it, and to also all other co-organizers. This event is timely, so we have the responsibility to ensure that our recovery from the COVID-19 brings about a better and more sustainable future, as many speakers said before. Also, it was said that there are huge social and economic consequences of this pandemic, especially with the women and the young people. But recognizing this, the EU, as a Team Europe, working together with the member states, working with the EBRD, pulled together around the 39 billion package to tackle the immediate challenges faced by partner countries as a global recovery framework. So the necessity of having a robust long-term strategies to achieve net zero emissions becomes all the more important in the post-COVID-19 world. Ladies and gentlemen, therefore, it's really crucial that we fully implement Agenda 2030, the Paris Agreement, and internationally agreed biodiversity goals. I believe that continued climate and environmental action is essential for preserving our prosperity and also preventing future health crises. It is a fact that healthy natural ecosystems are prerequisite for the prosperity. It was also said by the Deputy Prime Minister. It is also a fact that the climate change and environmental degradation, if unaddressed, will have a catastrophic consequences. The shrinking of the Aral Sea has been called one of the planet's worst environmental disasters for a good reason. And in this respect, we must all work together and avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. We must seize the opportunity of the recovery from the pandemic to build back better, greener, and more sustainably. Therefore, on behalf of the EU, really welcome Uzbekistan's efforts to build back better and to achieve the green economy. The adoption of the strategy for the transition of the Republic of Uzbekistan to the green economy in period of 2019-2030 has been important contribution to this objective, as said also by Deputy Prime Minister and other speakers. So to reach successfully these objectives, the EU continues to encourage the government really to enhance the alliances with international partners, civil society, and also the private sector. I believe that transformative green recovery can only take place through inclusive and cross-sectorial partnership. And DG Undp, our new DG's name, is another contribution to that. So the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated how vulnerable biodiversity loss makes us and how crucial a sustainable food system is. Moving towards a circular economy and sustainable consumption and productions must be achieved in the partnership and not in isolation. So the EU, we already supporting Uzbekistan's green transition through dedicated programs. Let me mention just Switch Asia. And here we are working hand in hand with the Uzbek government to elaborate on the national action plan on sustainable consumption and production and to promote greening in key economic sectors in the country. We are using our bilateral dialogue to promote green recovery actions inspired by European Green Deal, and we are willing to cooperate in the most relevant sectors to accelerate the transition to low carbon, clean and circular economies. I'm very happy. I have many colleagues from the Commission in this forum, starting with Astrid, who will tell you everything about our circular economy plan, far from biodiversity plan, farm to fork, and other action that EU is taking in this regard. But also, I believe that EU regional programs can be considered for supporting the transition to the green economy across the region. And this was also mentioned by Peter, that I strongly support. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, let me say that the green and sustainable recovery requires a coordinated efforts by all players. Today's forum is a good example of this cooperation, and EU together with Uzbek government, the UN, the international financial institutions, civil society, and the private sector need to play a prominent role. We welcome really your contributions. Thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you a very fruitful and successful discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jager, and indeed we are really pleased that this is a joint European Union undertaking and support to the government, this initial discussion, and we hope it will continue further. Now, let me go closer to home. I'm delighted to invite for the opening remarks Ms. Helena Fraser, the UN Resident Coordinator in Uzbekistan, a strong advocate for green recovery and attainment of sustainable development goals in Uzbekistan. Ms. Fraser, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to join today's forum and speak on behalf of the United Nations country team in Uzbekistan. I am grateful to the government, the European Union, UNDP and UNECE for organizing today's event. It's an excellent opportunity to discuss where Uzbekistan stands in its recovery from COVID-19 and how government, business, development partners and civil society can and must come together to accelerate policies and incentives for a green recovery. 2021 is a vital year for our planet. In December, the Secretary General called on all member states to declare a climate emergency. And in January this year, he urged the international community to accelerate its ambition in advance of COP26 in November, and ensuring COVID recovery and our planet's repair are two sides of the same coin. Transformational green policies are required to achieve this, as my colleague, Ms. Olurich Egger, has stated. Such steps will ensure a sustainable economic recovery from COVID-19 and forge new paths for growth. Here in Uzbekistan, the Aral Sea crisis serves as a forceful reminder to us that human policies cause climate heating. The loss of the sea due to deliberate irrigation practices is a significant factor in the twice higher than average climate warming that our sub-region experiences. and in the terrible dust storms, soil degradation, biodiversity loss that plagues the once flourishing Aral Sea Basin. Ladies and gentlemen, we know the solutions, and it's good that Uzbekistan has joined the community of nations in adopting its national sustainable development targets in the areas of climate change adaptation, mitigation, biodiversity preservation, waste management, energy efficiency, fossil fuel subsidy rationalization, and others. Uzbekistan has also committed to decrease specific emissions of greenhouse gases per unit of GDP by 10% by 2030 from the 2010 level. Yet we know that more is needed. And in line with the Secretary General's call, we encourage Uzbekistan to raise its ambition on all fronts. Dear friends, as Deputy Prime Minister Kuchkarov stated, green recovery is not an optional add-on. It is a must for economic growth. The UN country team in Uzbekistan welcomes the national strategy for the transition to a green economy adopted in 2019. This strategy aims to contribute to fulfilling obligations under the Paris Agreement, ratified by Uzbekistan in 2018, as well as additional commitments under the national SDGs. We welcome the creation of the Interdepartmental Council for the Promotion and Implementation of the Green Economy. It's vital that this council engages in continuous dialogue with national and international experts, private sector, civil society, think tanks, so as to harness innovation and capacity to accelerate green development. Ladies and gentlemen, over the last 12 months, the UN country team, in partnership with international financial institutions, have been supporting the government of Uzbekistan to respond and recover to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, placing a strong emphasis on green recovery. And as we look ahead to 2030, our UN family is placing climate action at the heart of our work. Under UNDP's leadership, UN agencies have set out an ambitious plan to support the government to focus on sustainable, climate responsible and resilient development as one of just 3 priorities under our 5-year Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. Together, as a UN family, we will continue our work to accelerate the effort to transform the Aral Sea from a lifeless desert into a region of innovation and green technology as envisaged by government, drawing on global good practice and maximizing the impact of the multi-partner Human Security Trust Fund for the Aral Sea region. In closing, let me suggest 3 points that we can bear in mind during the discussions today. First, a whole of government approach is vital. Green recovery does not concern 1 or 2 ministries and state committees. Today's discussions and the UNDP policy brief will emphasize the need for action across all sectors: energy, construction, water, agriculture, procurement, health, education, financing. Second, a whole of society approach is a must. Civic engagement and public participation, including by women, youth, rural communities, is key. Every child in Uzbekistan needs to know why they should not waste water or dump plastics, why green energy is vital for their future, why they need new skills to join a workforce driven by green jobs. And third, of course, political leadership and a voice on the global stage. The will and the leadership are there. We've heard that today so far. But we look forward to seeing Uzbekistan engaging increasingly actively at regional and global levels in ministerials and roundtables, including in the run-up to COP26, sharing its experience and taking bold action. Dear friends, there's no trade-off between economic growth, progress and environmental sustainability. There are only significant opportunities within a green economy for investment, for growth, for security. Countries that forge new, more sustainable paths will be stronger, more resilient, more food secure, and more prosperous. I look forward to a stimulating dialogue over the coming 2 days placing greener, more sustainable recovery at the heart of the COVID-19 recovery in Uzbekistan. This is not only good for growth, but vital to the health and prosperity of society and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Helena, very much, and thank you for bringing a specific point. Colleagues, participants, we have now finalized the welcoming remarks. Thank you, big thank you to all speakers. It has been a rather inspiring and strategic setting for the forum and for the further discussion of today and tomorrow. I will not summarize definitely, but let me flag a few issues what we have heard. We've heard about the importance to invest in green jobs and achieve a just transition, but also about the criticality of a responsible use of natural and water resources and ecosystems, and particularly in the times of a growing population and urbanization, about the need for more ambitious climate action to reduce the carbon emissions, and that green recovery is not only possible, but it is also economically sensible. There is no contradiction between economic growth and green economy. On the contrary, that was the message that we have heard from the government as well, and which is very much welcome. It is really great to have heard the government's commitment to further advance green development in Uzbekistan, and the assurance of development partners to join the efforts around building a roadmap towards green economy in Uzbekistan under the leadership of the government of Uzbekistan, as indeed inclusive and cross-sectorial partnership, as it was mentioned, is necessary. So let me stop here. Thank you all once again. And on behalf of the organizers, I wish all of us a successful and productive event today and tomorrow. But before I pass the floor to the next moderator, let me invite us that we turn on the videos for a brief group photo. And then we will have a very short video sketches to serve as an inspiration for all of us at the forum, young and not so young. Let us turn on our videos. And someone is taking a photo, I hope, I think. Oh, yes. We are at the moment 201. Elvira, are we done with the photo, I mean? Yeah?
Firuza, can you confirm, please?
Yes, colleagues, thank you. We are done.
Thank you. Thank you very much to everyone, to our distinguished speakers, and to all of us that joined us today. So let me now pass the moderation of the first session of the forum to Ms. Laura Altinger, Head of the Regional Nature, Climate and Energy Team of UNDP Bureau for Europe and Central Asia. Laura, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Matilda. Good afternoon to the honorable participants of this forum. It is my pleasure and honor to moderate this first session today, entitled Building Forward Better, Green Recovery and the Way Forward. Today we have an excellent panel that will explore how the recovery efforts from the pandemic in Uzbekistan can be greened and the country can emerge stronger from the pandemic on its road to economic recovery and the transition to low carbon, climate resilient green growth. As Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Economic Development, His Excellency Mr. Kuchkarov discussed in his welcoming remarks, there is no trade-off between green and growth. And this panel will explore how both of these complement each other as part of the green recovery effort. On our panel, we have 4 speakers. Ms. Astrid Schulmacher, she is the Director for Global Sustainable Development of the European Commission's Directorate General for Environment. And she will cover the European Green Deal, which is the EU roadmap to sustainability, and specifically speak on one of its key pillars, the circular economy. We will hear about how countries like Uzbekistan can adopt and implement its principles to achieve greater resource efficiency, as also stressed by His Excellency, Mr. Maksudov, in the opening. Secondly, we will hear from Mr. George Buma, the Regional Sustainable Development Team Leader at the UNDP Bureau for Europe and Central Asia, who will cover the regional opportunities and challenges for the green recovery and make the case for investing in sustainability, not least to avoid the risk of stranded assets. Third, we will hear from Mr. Scott Foster, the Director of the Sustainable Energy Division at the Regional Commission UNECE, on measures to promote the green recovery, covering the transition to renewables, the opportunities for green jobs, and greater energy access, as well as low-hanging fruits such as methane management. And last but not least, we're honored to have with us Dr. Nishanov, First Deputy General Director, Center of the Hydromet Service at the Cabinet of Ministers, and also the focal point of UNFCCC, who will address the management of climate risks and how these impact the country's economic development. At the end, we will have a Q&A session, and we would welcome questions and contributions from all of the participants in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So please start sending us your questions now as we move forward, and we will get to them in the Q&A session. Thank you very much. Ms. Schulmacher, the floor is yours. Over.
Right, thank you very much. Small technical problem. Good afternoon from Brussels. It's an honor to be with you and a pleasure to be kicking off this first panel. I have in principle a PowerPoint presentation. I didn't quite manage to upload it. I don't know if anybody else can, but I'll just note there it is. Roughly. You could see that a bit differently.
Yeah. I've shared it. Yeah,
yeah, please do just a slideshow.
Yeah.
Show it as a slide or just.
Can you hear them?
Please, yeah, perfect. Just go to the next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So now one slide back, please. Anyway, so in the 7 minutes I have, which I would like to talk about the Circular Economy Action Plan in the European Green Deal and how it is relevant. Now, as we've already heard, the European Green Deal is a set of policy initiatives by the European Commission with the overarching aim to make Europe climate neutral by 2050, but it is also, and importantly, our growth strategy. And as such, it also guides the European Union's recovery effort. Next slide, please. Next slide. I think that doesn't work. So let's just forget about the PowerPoint presentation for a moment. There we are. So you see on screen that the European Green Deal is a set, previous slide, a set of initiatives out of which the Circular Economy Action Plan is one. The Circular Economy Action Plan starts with the sentence, there is only one planet Earth, but by 2050, the world will be consuming as if there were three. And that is clearly a problem and one that needs addressing. Now, the International Resource Panel tells us that 50% of greenhouse gas emissions and 90% of biodiversity loss and water stress are linked to the resource extraction and the processing of materials. In principle, we're on slide 2, but please just take the PowerPoint away.
Could you please blend back in slide 2 for the speaker?
Let's just take the
second slide, please. So scroll up. Up. Okay, no, yeah, this one. Okay, thank you. Speaker, go ahead.
Yeah, now let's move to the next slide. Now, why do we mention the Circular Economy Action Plan with such importance? We believe this is also something that is very relevant for Uzbekistan. And we've heard the Deputy Prime Minister speak about it and all other speakers about the efforts that Uzbekistan is making to move into green growth. We see the circular economy as a key component of such efforts. Uzbekistan is rapidly developing, there's increasing consumption, and therefore also need to move towards greater efficiency in the resource use. And that in turn is necessary for Uzbekistan to develop an economy that is competitive. And I don't need to tell you that water stress, for example, is an issue you are grappling with, maybe grappling with even more as a result of climate change. So making the water sector, for example, circular and more efficient will be very important as well. If I move now to the next slide and just explain briefly what the circular economy is about in Europe. Previous slide, please. Can you please go? Thank you. It's really about making sustainable products the norm in the European Union. And we're doing that by taking action along the whole cycle of production, as you can see on the left side of this screen. We also want to empower consumers. We want to reduce waste overall. And we're focusing on a series of key sectors, which you see on the middle of the screen. Now, I don't want to go into detail on those, but just to say that these are high pressure categories from the perspective of primary resource use, but also from the perspective of greenhouse gas emissions. So we are developing sectoral strategies in all these areas to make these sectors circular. Just to give you one example, or two maybe, the construction and building sector in the European Union consumes about 50% of all extracted materials and is responsible for more than 35% of all waste generation. So having a sectoral strategy here that addresses these issues is of great importance. And similarly, looking at plastics and packaging, for example, at this time, we are producing almost 26 million tons of plastic waste in the European Union every year. Only 30% of this are collected for recycling. The rest is landfilled or ends up at litter. This means in practice for us that 95% of plastic packaging material value is lost to our economy. And that's about 70 to 105 billion euros every year. So that's something we can't really afford. Next slide, please. Now, beyond looking at sectors, we very importantly want to develop a product policy framework that makes products on our market sustainable. As it is, the products that we have, they break down too quickly and they cannot really be reused, or they can only be used once. And that is a situation we really want to change. In doing so, we want to focus on design of the products, because at the design stage, you determine 80% of the environmental impacts of the products. And in particular, you determine the future fate of the product. So whether or not the product is easily recyclable or not is really an issue on how it is designed in the first place. So as part of this initiative, we are then considering new rules that would address product durability, reusability, upgradability, and repairability, but also the presence of hazardous chemicals in the products that would hinder the recycling. And we would also look at restricting single use of certain products and at countering premature obsolescence. At the electronic sector, for example, which is one of the sectors in focus, the right to repair comes into play. So what we are looking at is whether we can have new regulatory measures for mobile phones, laptops, and tablets in the European Union, and whether there could be an EU-wide take-back scheme to return and sell back old mobile phones, tablets, etc. So that's just to give you a flavor of what's happening in the area of product policy. Next slide, please. We also want to look at the waste policy. And the next slide shows you a little bit about what our plans are in this area. Waste policy is a key part of the circular economy policy. Our priority is to eliminate waste. So no waste is better than having to manage waste. So we have a waste hierarchy, and we're following the principle that prevention is the most desirable action, hence the action at the design stage, as I mentioned before. Now, we have already legislated to have targets for the collection of, for example, municipal waste, packaging waste, we have landfill limits, etc. As part of our new action plan, we will now go further and also adopt waste reduction targets for more complex streams And we're also looking at doing more on the extended producer responsibility. Now, to come to a close, just to say the European Union is quite aware that all of this cannot be done in isolation. So we want to work towards a global circular economy. We want to reach out to partners to join us in this transition journey. I just want to mention two examples. We have recently, just 10 days ago, actually, in the margins of the United Nations Environment Assembly, launched our new Global Alliance for Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, bringing together governments that are interested in promoting the circularity internationally, in sharing experience with each other, in seeing what are the knowledge gaps that need to be addressed, how can we help each other. And we're also working with, at the moment, I think already 100 countries that are interested in that, to work towards a global agreement on plastics that would look at this particularly critical value chain, critical for economic growth, but critical also in terms of environmental impacts, to address upstream the way plastics are designed and to reduce single-use plastics in a binding legal framework. And lastly, and this has been very clearly said by many speakers before, it is very important that the circular economy policy is not a policy in isolation. It needs to be a policy for the whole of government, and it also needs to be embedded in all other policy strategies. And the next and final slide, I just want to mention that as part of our European Green Deal, we have many other policies that were already mentioned, and we make sure that all of these also integrate the thinking on circularity. There's our climate target plan, for example, where we say we want to achieve 55% greenhouse gas reduction by 2030, and that of course can only be achieved if the circular economy is part of this story. We have a farm to fork strategy, in which we're also looking at the circularity of the agricultural sector. We have a renovation wave in which we want to kickstart our economic recovery. And there as well, this is about energy efficiency, renewable energies, but also about bringing circularity to the building sector. And the same, our chemical strategy, as I mentioned before, tries to make sure that chemicals are sustainable and tries to help us not to have hazardous chemicals in our products, which we subsequently want to reduce and recycle. This was just a glimpse of what we're doing, and a little longer than intended. Apologies for the technical glitch, but I hope you got an idea what this is all about, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Schulmacher. That was excellent. I pass the floor now to Mr. George Boomer, please.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to be with you, and congratulations to the government for the initiative and to the organisers for bringing this event together. And I'm happy to be here with you. I've been asked to talk briefly on some of the regional economic development and cooperation issues that we can leverage from to focus on a green recovery. Next slide, please. But I first wanted to take a little bit of time just to set the scene of how we think about regional cooperation and some of the opportunities that we see in Central Asia particularly. And certainly I think Uzbekistan has been leading very much in the desire to undertake a series of governance reforms to create stronger markets, both internally and both regionally, but also more broadly as well. I think with some of the other countries in the region, some of these reforms that are needed to help the countries shift more into the market-based economies have been lagging a little bit, and particularly some of the governance perspectives which are significantly presenting challenges in the age of COVID, when there's been such a complex array of impacts, and both from a health and economic perspective, and then going into the social issues as well. Of course, then there's the intra-regional, and we've heard about the Aral Sea ambitions, which is obviously a fantastic opportunity, I think. But then we've also heard briefly on Fergana Valley, you know, and perhaps cross-border, you know, intra-regional, cross-regional opportunities as well, to work on strengthening some of the systems and human resources to help push local development further. I think from a trade perspective, there's a desire to look more closely at the WTO, but also the influence of the Belt and Road Initiative that this will have going forward. But I think there's also challenges around, I'll speak in a moment, on undiversified economies and the social impacts this has. We've also heard some on Agenda 2030, and I think from our perspective particularly, I mean, this is a framework that fits with the way recovery should be promoted, and it covers all the important policy issues that I think governments take as being important for their own national development ideals, and I see a lot of convergence in regional development plans and also recovery plans as well. And I think for multi-stakeholder partnerships such as the CAREC Institute or the CAREC Economic Cooperation Platform, there's a very good common policy framework around energy and energy issues and how to promote new technology and investments. But of course, this presents some political economy risks once you start talking about regional markets. So I think there's plenty of opportunities, but also a number of challenges which need to be worked on in the time ahead to promote a much more regional perspective to green recovery. Next slide, please. But of course, from a regional perspective, we very much quickly have to then look at how national economies are performing and their ability to be able to function within a regional cooperative framework. And this is perhaps one of the challenges facing many countries is that since their independence, their diversification has reduced, which I think COVID and also the great financial recession of 2007-2008 presented particular external shocks to countries, which resulted in certain volatilities and inflationary pressures, which seem to be now cyclical impacts on economic growth and how to make countries more resilient in the face of this. And I certainly think embarking on both a digital and a green agenda is going to be one way to do that. Next slide, please. I think that there's a number of issues then that kind of relate to financing around the green transition. And I think that many countries are facing this issue at the moment. And certainly from a private sector perspective, there's been a wide-scale push to reduce investments into carbon infrastructure. And I think that what this slide is merely suggesting is that, if there is investments into infrastructure which might provide some marginal efficiency, but it's based very much on carbon technology, in the years ahead, this will be locked in and the asset will be stranded. So over a period, if the life of the asset is 20 to 30 years, in years ahead, the asset may not be worth anything and it may not be able to be part of the productive economy. And therefore, if we're going to invest into the future, we need to look now at how we increase the uptake of technology into low carbon economy. Next slide, please. And I think, I'll probably take a little bit of a different perspective on some of the issues in looking at this systems change. And I think particularly from the perspective of when we look at some of the socioeconomic issues and particularly labour markets and also some of the challenges in bringing around this systems change, because once we start talking about winners and losers and shifting from brown sectors to green sectors, it disrupts. But I think, we're at a point now where we've also seen disruption coming from the overall philosophy that optimization of the economy and the market is a good thing. And I think that we now realize that this is perhaps not the direction we should be going, and that innovation, experimentation and new digital technologies and low carbon growth are really where the future of development lies. And I think in this central circle here, there's a lot of attention that needs to be put towards speeding up and scaling up some of these interventions that will see this shift come about. Next slide, please. And I think, there's a number of socioeconomic policy areas that will help facilitate this. Certainly, the COVID pandemic has shown that health governance is going to be critical to ensuring that, we're able to progress in continuing growth and development. I think financing and policy choices, as I've explained, and particularly around fossil fuel subsidies and the impacts these have on keeping governments locked into existing forms of investment and current forms of technology. And I think that this is a highly contentious area, but it's also a very important area and will become increasingly important as issues such as carbon taxes or border taxes come into focus in between trading blocks. I certainly think labour markets are a key issue. If we're going to shift from brown sectors to green sectors, there will be jobs lost. And we need to look at how we have government programs to support new opportunities in different sectors. And this requires us to look at social safety nets as well, as we recognise that certain parts of society may be losers from this, and how do we support them to make that transition to a greener economy. I'm a little bit short for time here, but I just also wanted to focus that the technology and the digital side of things is really important. And there are many kind of untapped regional potentials, I think, and hopefully with this push by the government of Uzbekistan to promote the green transition, it will hopefully lead the way for other countries and then provide the platform needed to help support broader regional cooperation around these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, George. I'll pass the floor to Mr. Scott Foster, please.
All right, thank you very much, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I also have a slideshow that will be coming on shortly. I'd like to thank you for including me on this panel. It's actually a pleasure to be with you. As you can appreciate, the idea of a pivot to a green and sustainable system, it's concentrating minds across the world, across the UNECE region. As you can see from the title slide here, I've been asked to speak to measures that might promote sustainable energy and what the implications could be for a COVID-19 green recovery in Uzbekistan. I think it's clear that we are trying to respond to the current crisis. We've got to learn the lessons of this crisis. I'm not on that slide yet. Can you go back to the first one, please? We need to learn the lessons of this crisis and also previous crises. So understanding and learning from what's happened in the past. We then need to prepare for the next crisis, because there certainly is going to be another one coming down the road. And in that preparation, we need to think in terms of resilience. We want to be rational. We want to be rational economically. We want to be rational environmentally. And we want to be rational socially in how we put a response together. So when we think about this pivot and we see what COVID has done in terms of economic implosions and the opportunity that creates for some kind of a shift to a different outcome, we want to think about not only restarting an economy, but restarting it in a way that actually delivers sustainable outcomes. And we see that, as I said, everywhere across our region. I would like to focus on 4 areas of activity. And now if we could move to the next slide. And we think these could be of value for Uzbekistan. The first one is in the area of high performance buildings. And we've got a lot of work going on with high performance buildings. We work on energy efficiency in buildings, and people have been talking about building energy efficiency for a long time. It doesn't seem to happen. But when you think about what buildings actually do, it's where people spend their time. 40% of carbon emissions come from the energy services that buildings consume. You've got health issues with indoor air pollution and mildew and allergies and the rest of it. So suddenly you have to take a holistic view. And we've divided into a series of subsets, but these need to be interacting very carefully. You want to think about how you build your buildings, the structures, what are the materials you're using, how you design it, and the construction techniques you use. And if you do that properly, you can drive the energy requirements of buildings down very low. But that's not the total story. You then have to go over to your systems, your heating, your ventilating, your air conditioning, all of the plug-in loads that you do, and you want to size those based on what you did over in the envelope space. By the time you've got those taken care of, you should be able to drive the energy requirements for the building down to a level that low or no carbon energy sources can meet them. You then, and I'm jumping over one to ICT, information and communications technology, you're going to be able to monitor temperature, monitor humidity, monitor indoor air quality, connect to the outside world, keep track of all of the materials that have gone into the building so that when you retire the building, you can recover them afterwards. So the idea of data management, what are you tracking, becomes critically important. You then connect into the city design and what the needs are for mobility and how can you deliver on low carbon mobility. If the transport system is going to develop all of this storage capacity, these batteries, all we have to do as a power industry is figure out how to connect it. We don't have to build it ourselves, and that changes the economics a lot. At the end of the day, if we do buildings right, we're actually delivering quality of life in terms that people can appreciate. Its comfort, its health, its affordability. In particular, if governments are going to be putting money into economies in order to relaunch the economy because of the COVID issue, they're going to be injecting money to contractors and carpenters and electricians and plumbers, and you're really putting cash back into the local communities. And that's a fantastic way for the money multiplier effect to have a very instantaneous benefit. If we can go to the next slide, please. That was all about buildings and high performance buildings, and that's critically important. Then you come to a longer term perspective, resources. We are going to need resources for the future. But at the rate we're consuming current resources, the wastes that we produce and the kinds of resources that we're producing, we're going to need 7 planet Earths if we continue to develop and we continue to consume the way we do. So we have to rethink resources. And instead of basing resources purely on economics, we have to think about pretty much the whole 2030 agenda. We've got to look in a comprehensive way across the resource value chains for all sectors, connecting them in a coherent way. So we have developed at UNECE a United Nations framework classification that allows you to sort out and report the resources that you've got under management. And that's fine, it's a balance sheet issue. But building on that, we're developing a United Nations resource management system, which is much more of a dynamic, and make sure that you are investing in the critical raw materials, in the rare earths, but also all of the other mineral resources that you need for a sustainable future. And you've got to do that with a filtering process that allows you to optimize in a national perspective, optimize the resources that you're developing for future requirements. You then are able to progress your projects. You make sure you have social acceptability, and you make sure you're satisfying the ERG, the environmental social governance requirements that the financial institutions are requiring. So really rewrite that resource management narrative so that you are going to have the resources that you require. We can go to the next slide, please. There's a lot of discussion about renewables, and we've been doing renewables for quite a long time, and they are going to be essential. But the issue about getting renewables right is critically important. People complain about renewables and they're driving away jobs. That's actually not true. The number of green jobs that are possible is critical. The amount that renewables are contributing to decarbonization is insufficient. So we need to think through quite carefully, what are the rules of engagement? How do we define the energy market? How do we describe and write energy market rules in a way that allow renewables to have access? An old friend of mine was responsible for private equity investments in renewables. And he always said that the subsidies that are thrown at renewables are not what drove his business model, because he assumed they could come one day and be gone the next day. Rather, what was important to him was, am I having fair rules of access to the network? And am I getting fair access to end users? That means that it's not just throwing money at the problem, it's getting the rules of the game right. And that's critically important. If I take a regional perspective on renewables, I actually am much more capable of getting more renewables into the marketplace than if I try to do it just on a national basis. So it's not just national rules, it's regional rules as well. If I can go to the next slide, please. Methane management. Methane is a critically important greenhouse gas. And we're working towards a declaration of an international decade for methane management. We just had a session next door, which is talking about this. It's a critically important greenhouse gas. I won't go into the details on this graphic, but fully half of the opportunities for abating methane emissions make money. So this is actually a profitable investment, is to deal with methane. If the natural gas industry believes that it's part of the solution, part of the pathway to a sustainable energy outcome, if the natural gas industry believes that it's part of the solution set at the end, then it's got to enhance its sustainability credentials by dealing with the methane issues. There's a lot of technology that's out there for monitoring, for reporting, and for verifying methane emissions. It makes business sense, and we have the technology to remediate it. So that's all I'm going to say about methane management. If you can go to my last slide, which basically says thank you. Those are 4 key areas that we think are possible. It's sustainable resource management, it's high performance buildings, it's getting renewables right, and it's dealing with methane. And those are the things that we would like to offer. Thank you very much, and I'll turn it back to you, Ms. Altinger.
Yes, thank you very much for that thoughtful presentation. Thank you. Now, to round off the panel before we get to the Q&A, I'd like to welcome Ms. Sayora Abdullayeva. She's the head of Department on Monitoring Climate Change at the Center of Hydromet Service at the Cabinet of Ministers of Uzbekistan. Ms. Abdullayeva, the floor is yours.
Уважаемые участники Международного форума по зеленому восстановлению экономики, дамы и господа, от имени Центра гидрометеорологической службы Республики Узбекистан разрешите поприветствовать всех, кто сегодня участвует в онлайн-форуме. Сегодня проблема изменения климата стала беспрецедентным вызовом устойчивому развитию человечества и нашей планеты. И мы являемся свидетелями того, как глобальные изменения и изменчивость климата приводят к увеличению числа чрезвычайных ситуаций, разрушению уникальных экосистем, дефициту водных ресурсов, что подрывает энергетическую, продовольственную и экологическую безопасность. Я хотела бы отметить особенность прошедшего года и текущего периода, когда пандемия коронавируса продолжает распространяться по всему миру в широком диапазоне климатических, сезонных условий и условий окружающей среды. В своем докладе о состоянии климатического обслуживания в 2020 году от заблаговременных предупреждений к заблаговременным действиям генеральный секретарь Всемирной метеорологической организации профессор Петер Италос отметил, что хотя COVID-19 породил крупный международный кризис в области здравоохранения и экономики, на восстановление после которого потребуются годы, крайне важно помнить, что изменение климата будет продолжать представлять постоянную и растущую угрозу для человеческих жизней, экосистем, экономики и обществ на протяжении еще многих веков. Глобальное потепление ведет к увеличению повторяемости климатозависимых, опасных природных явлений, учащению периодов засухи и тепловых волн, изменению в режиме формирования водных ресурсов, что при условии отсутствия мер по смягчению последствий этих явлений может привести к росту потерь в сельскохозяйственном производстве, рисков для здоровья населения, снижению уровня благосостояния уязвимых к изменению климата сообществ, дополнительным негативным последствиям в бассейне Аральского моря, особенно в Приоралье. 90% бедствий по всему миру вызвано опасными явлениями, связанными с погодой, климатом и водой. Опасные природные явления нельзя предотвратить, но их заблаговременное предупреждение может уменьшить масштаб бедствий. Управление опасными явлениями, и в частности засухой, и снижением водного дефицита должно идти по пути создания комплекса мер и действий, которые помогут не допустить или смягчить негативные последствия и риски этих явлений, и заблаговременно обеспечить все заинтересованные слои населения информацией о возможности засухи и других опасных явлений. Раннее предупреждение о засухе позволяет местному населению заблаговременно подготовиться к засухе, смягчить ее негативные последствия. И поэтому большое внимание уделяется вопросам создания систем раннего предупреждения и распространения информации, разработке и усовершенствованию подходов к оценке водообеспеченности и водопотребления в маловодные годы. По оценкам специалистов, глобальное потепление будет и дальше способствовать росту повторяемости периодов с засухами и высокими летними температурами и изменению в режиме формирования водных ресурсов. В целом, по всей территории Узбекистана будут увеличиваться площади, подверженные селевому риску. Экстремальные проявления климатической изменчивости могут привести к возрастанию дефицита водных ресурсов и усилению рисков, связанных со значительными потерями в сельскохозяйственном производстве и с нехваткой питьевой воды, а также продуктов питания для населения. В настоящее время Центр гидрометеорологической службы начал подготовку долгосрочной стратегии по изменению климата, смягчению последствий изменения климата и, признавая необходимость принятия срочных мер по борьбе с изменениями климата, рассматривает возможность повышения амбиций по своим обязательствам в рамках Парижского соглашения. Совместно с ПРООН и Зеленым климатическим фондом начинается разработка национального адаптационного плана, направленного на наиболее уязвимые к изменению климата сектора экономики и регионы для продвижения средне- и долгосрочного планирования адаптационных мер и действий в Узбекистане, такие как сельское и водное хозяйство, здравоохранение, снижение риска стихийных бедствий и энергоэффективное строительство. Узгидромет совместно с Министерством инвестиций и внешней торговли развивает сотрудничество с Зеленым климатическим фондом, который открывает для нашей страны возможности доступа к ресурсам Зеленого климатического фонда, еще одного инструмента климатического финансирования рамочной конвенции ООН по изменению климата. При поддержке программы подготовки Узбекистана к доступу к ресурсам Зеленого климатического фонда создается национальная платформа для развития инициатив по адаптации к изменению климата, управлению климатическими рисками и смягчению его негативных последствий, а также разработке проектных предложений, отвечающих национальным приоритетам Республики Узбекистан. Благодарю за внимание.
Great. Well, thank you very much for that. So I think we'll start the Q&A session now. And I have a first few questions for the speakers. We have 13 minutes for the Q&A, so please keep sending those questions while we kick off here. So first, a question to Astrid on her presentation. I think you mentioned that the waste streams were particularly profitable, and maybe you could give an indication of those numbers, how profitable and how the different players in the waste stream can capitalize on their waste. Over.
Thank you. I didn't actually say they were profitable. I think the point I was trying to make is that we cannot afford to waste. So in the example that I gave on plastic packaging, for example, because we still don't have a good circular system for dealing with packaging, and because so much of it is also single use and is not then properly collected, we lose the economic value of this waste. And I gave you the figure of what, 70 to 105 billion annually. So it's quite a broad range of estimates. But the point that we see is that circular economy is good for the environment, and everybody has explained it. But also that by reintegrating these materials into the economy, we can actually save a lot of money. Now, the important thing is, and because time is short, I'll be a bit short there, is how do we make this integration of wasted materials profitable? And that's not necessarily obvious. Everybody will agree to the theory, but there are lots of barriers. People might be reluctant to taking secondary raw materials. There may be no standards for the secondary raw materials. There may be questions on the quality. Are they as good as new materials? And there may even be price issues. So if we don't have a fully circular economy, it may often be cheaper just to take a new raw materials than to go through the recycling process. And these are issues that governments have to address for the economy to work and to be fully circular.
Great. Any other speakers would like to come in on this point? Okay, then I'll ask the next question again to Astrid about the prioritization of the sectors. You mentioned that the EU has a number of sectoral strategies to make the sector circular. And how did you prioritize exactly the sectors? And what guidance can you give, in this context of Uzbekistan, how those sectors could be selected, the ones that should have first priority on the circularity? Over.
Well, I think that is probably a question that every country, every region should decide for itself. I mean, we looked this time more than before, we looked at the greenhouse gas abatement potential of circularity in these sectors. So we tried to choose sectors where going circular would help us save more greenhouse gas emissions. So that is one thing. And we also looked at the raw material requirements of some sectors. So, for example, in the case of electronics, it's quite clear, and I think known to all of us, that many of the high-tech gadgets we are addicted to and we love, such as our little mobile phones and others, require a whole load of partially rare earth materials or otherwise valuable materials. Gold, for example, is in our mobile phones. And again, it is an incredible waste that we throw these things away rather than recycling them, re-extracting these materials and putting them back into our economy. That's an economic issue, but certainly it's also an environmental issue. If you compare the environmental impacts from mining ore in order to then get to the gold which you need for your mobile phone, compared to recycling the mobile phones in a good recycling operation, there is no comparison. So you can save massively on environmental impacts. And that's what makes it so attractive, both from an economic and an environmental perspective. So that's what we've been looking at. And the last comment also, which is important, it's also the readiness of the sector. So you find also the textile sector, for example, it's the fifth largest greenhouse gas emitting sector, but it's also a sector which has very direct consumer contacts, and where the industry is aware that consumers are beginning to ask questions, and where consumers are saying, well, we actually want to have products that are sustainable. And there's again a direct link to Uzbekistan. You are leaders in water-intensive cotton production. So there is a case of looking at that part of the production cycle, see how you can make that more sustainable.
That's great. That's excellent guidance, which can be taken forward. Maybe I can turn now to George and his intervention. And George, you talked about some of the enabling conditions to speed and scale the intervention towards sustainability. And I was wondering if you could maybe give a little bit more sort of practical advice on where you see are the main enabling conditions that might be tackled by Uzbekistan. Over.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a multifaceted policy issue, right? It's a complex policy agenda, and the government has shown a great deal of interest to do reforms around labour market, social protection issues. But I think, these need to be linked also to the consequences of shifting to green outputs. And I think that for example, if fossil fuel subsidies are unwound, what's the social implications of that, and how do we create the correct social welfare measures so poorer households are not unduly punished because of the desire by the government to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels. Is one key example, but also perhaps to pick up from the last question as well, when you look at production, GDP output in all our countries in our region, the material resource footprint is very high. So, which sectors do we get efficiency gains by promoting new technologies and new production methods that could promote some of this circularity issues as well? And I think we need to look no further than perhaps the construction sector and the housing sector, as one of the previous speakers alluded to. There's a great deal to be gained from looking at energy efficiency issues across the region generally. So, thanks.
Thank you, George. On continuing on this practical note, Scott, I think you had a very targeted presentation in these 4 areas, and you mentioned this UN resource management system, which seems to be very important for countries. And I was wondering if you can let us know how can countries access and implement this, and then also talk to us a bit more about where you see the opportunities for the methane management and how countries can also profit from this, and in this line of thought as well, the green jobs. How can countries perhaps prioritize this green jobs agenda, given that the recovery from COVID is where the jobs agenda has come up to the very top of the priorities? How can countries prioritize this green jobs agenda? Over.
Thank you. That's quite the question. I'll try to get it by 1 o'clock in the next 2 hours. I'd like to respond first with Ms. Schumacher's presentation, because I found her remarks on circularity to be very apropos, and I would endorse them 1,000%. And in fact, we've got our upcoming commission in April, and the theme is circularity. And we are looking for commitments from countries to commit to a certain degree of circularity in their economies. And I'm sure our executive secretary would have made reference to that earlier on. I find that there are multiple layers at which the concept of circularity principles could be applied. And this is relevant to the UNRMS question that you've asked. The first is just in the production of raw materials and trying to reduce the amount of waste. And what's coming out as a waste in one value chain actually can be a resource in another one. And that's where you're trying to get into circularity to reduce and get to zero waste if possible. The second area then is, once you've got your raw materials, is the transformation. And again, trying to reduce and minimize how much waste, and anything that comes out of one process then goes into another one. In the third area, and this is what George has just referred to in terms of efficiency, there was a very interesting article today from BBC on white goods and the fact that many people don't bother repairing their white goods. They just chuck them out because it's cheaper to buy a new one. And that could be rethought, because the volume of waste produced by throwing away old fridges and washing machines and anything else, if we could have a culture of let's fix it, or let's not design it to break down, that would be hugely important. So in terms of accessing UNFC and UNRMS, UNECE actually has programs of training that we run, and that's done around the place. We have our resource week that's coming up the week after our commission session in April, and I would invite participants to join into that. Coming over to the green jobs area, I suspect it's a bit of a misnomer to talk about green jobs because what it is the employment structure of the future. And by investing in, whether it's renewables or high performance buildings or any of these areas, there is an entire portfolio of employment opportunities that emerge. So when certain administrations have talked about let's protect what was rather than going for what will be, this issue of jobs was on the table. And people seem to lose sight of when you build wind farms and when you build solar farms, you're actually not just having the installers, you're having the entire industry that's behind it, that's producing all of those materials. So the employment opportunities that are there, I'll call them green jobs, but it's actually just employment in a lot of basic functions that deliver those outcomes. And I think that's something that countries could benefit from taking close attention to. I'll stop because I could go forever.
That's great. Thank you so much, Scott and the panelists. I think we've had a few questions from the floor, and one is about how to minimize the use of plastics, and the other one is about the role of sustainable transport infrastructure. You've covered some of these aspects in your presentations. If you want to, if anybody wants to make some last comments on either of those issues, then please do so now, and otherwise we'll wrap up the session.
Well, I can, if I can just come in super quickly. I think minimizing the use of plastics is for us really a massive preoccupation, also from the perspective of marine litter. And that's why we think we need a strategy for the whole sector. We need a strategy that starts looking upfront at the type of plastics we have, where we need plastics. There are applications where plastics are needed and cannot be replaced, and many others where there are alternatives. And very importantly, we think we need to focus on single-use plastics. And we have done that with specific legislation. We're trying to just phase out some, like straws or plastic cutlery, where there are alternatives that are easily available, that are not expensive, that we do it. And in others, we say, and I'll come back to what I tried to explain earlier, let's look at the design. How can we minimize waste there through design features? Just to say, I think that's the key there is to have a strategy for the whole industry, but even more importantly, to do it with all actors. So to bring together the consumers, but also the plastics industry, to say this is not against plastics, not an anti-plastic strategy, but it's a sustainability strategy for the sector that also ensures its competitiveness and that it respects the environment. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, so EU is a very good example. On the sustainable transport, I think, Scott, you've covered that to some extent in your presentation on the e-mobility and so on. Would you like to say a last word to close the panel?
I would. Thank you very much. There are huge debates that are ongoing where the electric vehicle industry says that they're number one, the natural gas vehicles say that we're number one, and the hydrogen economy says, no, it's all about us. And I find that the idea of looking through in a post-COVID world, what the demand for mobility will be, and then sorting out the most effective way of delivering the needed mobility in light of social, environmental, climate change issues is critically important. So you can't actually say this is the answer. Every country has got its own endowment of natural resources, its own regulatory, cultural, and legislative heritage. But in that context, there's some fundamental principles that should be applied. I think decarbonizing transport and thinking of resources and thinking of the sectors as services is the first place to start. Thank you.
Great, excellent. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. I'm sure there were lots of more questions we could have asked our speakers here, but I want to thank you all very warmly for your contributions and for your excellent presentations. They will be available to everybody, so please have a look and study those after the session. And now I'd like to turn back to the organizers. They have a video that will be shown now. And so thank you all for your attention and for this very interesting discussion.
So next session.
Yes, please. We are moving now to the next session. Session number 2.
Okay.
Yes, let me invite Ms. Zulfia Zikrina, the key expert of Switch Asia SCP facility, to do the moderation of the next session on the topic of identifying gaps and opportunities for green recovery in Uzbekistan. Zulfia, I hope you are online.
Yes, I'm online.
Over to you.
Thank you very much, Matilda. Your Excellency, Deputy Minister, distinguished participants, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Allow me to open the second session with title, The Building Forward Better Strategy. My name is Zulfira Zikrina, as Matilda introduced me. I'm key expert for Central Asia, Switch Asia SCP facility, and I will moderate the second session. As you can see on the agenda, we have 4 speakers, introduce government, private sector, and 2 international high qualified experts, introduce Undp expert and UNICEF expert. So I will introduce each expert before their speech. So that's why no introduce one after another. So before giving the floor to the first speaker, I'd like to emphasize that transition to the green economy is a long process started since the Sustainable Development Summit, which was held in Johannesburg in 2002. It's recognized that a lot of major environmental and social problems caused because of the unsustainable consumption and production patterns. And GPOI was developed. GPOI, it means Johannesburg Plan of Implementation. And this plan committed all parties to move to the sustainable consumption and production patterns. During the next summit, which was held after 10 years, the slogan "Future We Want," Future We Want was declared that government have to develop green economy strategies. And Uzbekistan has developed green economy strategy and approved it in October 2019, just before several months of pandemic shock. And now it's a brilliant and good time, momentum to see where Uzbekistan stands in its green recovery journey and better build forward. So I think it's a really breakthrough time for the country. And now all our high qualified speakers and the government authority can deliver the presentation, and we will discuss 3 documents like green economy strategy, policy brief, and prepared by Undp, and the 3rd environmental performance review prepared by UNICEF and pool of national and international experts. So it's my great pleasure to give a floor to the Babur Kalandarovich Abdinazarov, Deputy Minister for Economic Development and Poverty Reduction of Uzbekistan. Mr. Babur Kalandarovich is responsible for industrial policy and the development of industrial sectors. So please, Deputy Minister, microphone is yours.
Thank you, Mrs. Zikrina, and good afternoon, dear distinguished guests and Mrs. Dimovskaya. Thank you very much for this excellent organized forum, and thank you, dear speakers, for very comprehensive presentations. And with your permission, I will also start my presentation. Just a second. Okay. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, we can. We can see. Can you please enlarge it?
Yeah. With your permission, I'll do it in Russian. Уважаемые дамы и господа, сегодня вот на этой сессии я хотел бы попрезентовать последствия COVID-19 в Узбекистане предпринимаем меры в сфере зеленой экономики, осуществляемые государством. Значит, основные 4 момента, которые хотел бы подчеркнуть, это по сессии эпидемиологической ситуации COVID-19, деятельность в сфере зеленой экономики и ее направления, а также предпринимаемые и планируемые меры в данном направлении. По сессии эпидемиологической ситуации COVID-19, значит, если посмотреть только по части промышленных предприятий, из существующих или работающих 72 тысяч с личным предприятий временно остановили производственный процесс 16 671. Со стороны государства были предприняты меры по определению именно проблем, с которыми столкнулись данные предприятия, и путем создания антикризисного комитета было организовано, значит, адресное направление работы и по поддержке данных предприятий. Таким образом, значит, в результате пандемии, в результате, значит, ограничительных мер, значит, 137 тысяч более работников временно были уволены, то есть они остались без работы. Но благодаря, значит, как бы предпринятых государством мер удалось значит, к сентябрю 2020 года вернуть 98 с лишних процентов данных работников в рабочие места. Какие именно меры были предприняты? Теперь, если посмотреть, вам всем известно, что в данной ситуации, в период карантина, очень сильно пострадали работники сферы туризма, а также сферы услуг. И, соответственно, были даны налоговые каникулы индивидуальных предпринимателям, которые занимаются туризмом. Кроме этого, для предприятий в сфере туризма и гостиничных услуг, значит, и авиации, они были освобождены от уплаты земельного налога и налога на имущество, а также снижен размер социального налога для них с 12% до 1%. А также для 83 тысяч сельскохозяйственных производителей размер налогов за пользование водным ресурсом были снижены на 50%. Значит, благодаря этим мерам в результате 2020 года было обеспечено, мы смогли обеспечить рост экономики в размере 1,6%. Теперь в сфере зеленой экономики, значит, ну, с 2017 года, 1 января, у нас как бы на территории республики запрещен, значит, выпуск или производство и реализация ламп накаливания мощностью свыше 40 Вт. А также соответствующее постановление президента по переходу по стратегии по переходу в зеленую экономику, значит, государство поставило амбиции создать 3 гигаватт ветровых мощностей и 5 гигаватт солнечных электростанций. И таким образом снизить удельные выбросы парниковых газов на единицу ВВП на 10% к 2030 году от уровня 2010 года. А также двукратное повышение показателя энергоэффективности и снижение углеродоемкости валового внутреннего продукта. Значит, модернизация инфраструктуры промышленных предприятий за счет повышения энергоэффективности не менее чем на 20%. Для этого значит, был принят закон об использовании возобновляемых источников энергии в 2019 году, а также принято постановление, направленное по совершенствованию деятельности с обращением с бытовыми и строительными отходами. Для электромобилей установлена таможенная пошлина в размере 0%, а также ратификация Парижского соглашения и в том числе принятая данная стратегия перехода Республики Узбекистан в зеленую экономику. Приоритетным направлением зеленой экономики, вполне, если смотреть, вполне совпадает с презентацией господина Скотта, в том числе это повышение энергоэффективности базовых отраслей, диверсификация потребления энергоресурсов и развитие использования возобновляемых источников энергии, и адаптация, смягчение последствий изменения климата, повышение энергоэффективности, эффективности использования природных ресурсов и сохранения природных экосистем. Для этого в системе электроэнергетики, теплоэнергетики, нефтегазовой отрасли, химической промышленности, значит, осуществляется и во всех этих направлениях осуществляются, значит, инвестиционные проекты, направленные на повышение энергоэффективности данных предприятий, а также уменьшение ресурсоемкости, а также повышение эффективности данных предприятий. При этом хотелось бы отметить, что кроме этого, в данном, что является еще одним немаловажным фактом, что в данный момент правительством осуществляется трансформация крупнейших государственных предприятий, и в том числе в этих процессах предусмотрено, значит, внедрение системы GRI, Global Reporting Initiative, соответственно, и ESG, который как бы еще раз повышает как бы социальную ответственность этих предприятий и, соответственно, по вопросам сохранения как бы природы. Если конкретно остановиться по возобновляемым источникам энергии, в республике осуществляется ряд очень много проектов, то есть по гидростанциям у нас 13 перспективных проектов в период 2021-2026 года, то есть увеличение его мощности и доведение до 3,8 гигаватт. Кроме этого, в данный момент работает отдельная группа, которая в течение до апреля текущего года предоставит правительству новые как бы перспективные проекты по созданию малых ГЭС. А также, значит, на данный момент уже реализуются ГЧП проекты по созданию солнечных электростанций, ветровых электростанций. И уже, значит, IFC нас поддерживает, ADB, EBRD, то есть все эти МФИ, они поддерживают в организации и объявлении тендеров по осуществлению данных инвестиционных проектов в формате ГЧП. Кроме того, Всемирным банком в Узбекистане, значит, осуществляется проект повышения энергоэффективности промышленных предприятий. Данная как бы группа реализации проекта находится при Министерстве экономического развития и сокращения бедности. И в данном проекте участвует несколько национальных банков, и она в данный момент она идет в третьей фазе, значит, в первой фазе 25 миллионов они были как бы уже освоены, а также вторая фаза 100 миллионов долларов от Всемирного банка, группы Всемирного банка, и третья фаза тоже. И вот сейчас у нас последний, как бы следующий этап, я не скажу последний, а следующий этап, это, значит, в размере 100 миллионов евро, это Европейского инвестиционного банка. Мы сейчас готовим документы, чтобы уже как бы disperse эти деньги, то есть освоить эти средства для дальнейшего финансирования проектов по повышению энергоэффективности промышленных предприятий. В целом, такое направление, то, что осуществляется правительством. Спасибо за ваше внимание. Буду рад, если будут вопросы какие-то. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое, уважаемый заместитель министра Бабур Каландарович. Спасибо, что вы так подробно рассказали о текущей ситуации в период пандемии и после, сейчас вот в постпандемийный период. Я думаю, что у Узбекистана есть большие возможности, вот если сравнить на уровне Центральноазиатского региона, быстрыми темпами переходить на зеленую экономику, потому что у вас очень хорошие отраслевые министерства имеются, поэтому отдельное министерство инновационного развития, водного хозяйства, отдельное министерство по жилищно-коммунальному хозяйству. То есть это очень важно, когда есть такие вот секторальные министерства. Я думаю, что у страны большой потенциал по переходу к зеленой экономике. Спасибо вам большое за презентацию. Я думаю, что после всех презентаций у нас будет еще время подискутировать, задать вам вопросы от аудитории и обменяться мнениями. The next presenter is Randall Purcell. He is independent strategic and technical consultant. His presentation is Opportunities for COVID-19 Green Recovery. Now, Randall is a Undp expert. He has an excellent, brilliant background as expert. So, as a technical expert to the United Nations and other development agencies and professor of the University in Madrid. Randall has degrees in economics and public policy from Columbia University and the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. Until last year, he was senior advisor at the World Food Program. It's very much important for all of us to hear attentively his presentation, and recipient of the 2020 Nobel Peace Prize, representing the organization on the 2030 agenda at United Headquarters in New York, and leading efforts to develop common climate and resilience livelihood programming. So, Randall, microphone is yours with your presentation, please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me and can you see the slides?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, and you can see the slides as well?
So far not.
So far not.
Randall, for the sake of time, would you like me to run the slides for you?
No, it's so much easier if I do it. Share screen. I've got the shared screen up. Okay, sorry, I've got it here. Okay, I think now you can see it, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction. I just want to be clear that it's not me, of course, that won the World Food Prize, the Peace Prize. It's the World Food Program. They've done a fantastic job. So thanks. I'll try to do justice, I think, in quick summary to a paper that UNDP's prepared to help the government think through, and I think most importantly, to implement the policy options we've been talking about to build forward better. That is to build forward, both out of COVID, but at the same time to achieve, and I think the government's very keen on this, a high economic growth, but also in a way that's environmentally sustainable. So that's quite important. As we know, we face economic challenges, critical ones post-COVID, and also critical environmental ones. I think on the latter here, we see all the numbers going the wrong way, right? CO2 levels, biodiversity loss, phosphates, nitrogen, fresh water use, land use, et cetera, all very bad news, really. And I think the world is way behind where we need to be, of course. And we see the manifestations here in premature deaths from air pollution, biodiversity loss, water stress, and increases in greenhouse gas emissions. And I think for Uzbekistan, the trends are fairly devastating. We've just heard quite a lot about the RLC. That's been going on for what, 30 years? I remember my days at the World Bank some 25 years ago, talking to water colleagues on the RLC. I think there's been great progress in recent years, but it's been a long time in coming. Devastating in the quality of the air, the use of water, of course, we see on the left there, and the danger of the economy getting stuck with energy-intensive so-called stranded assets. And we see the share of petroleum gas there as exports in the country, which is quite large. You see on the right-hand side of the slide, the UN, UNDP, UNECE, the World Bank, and others have recently undertaken some quite detailed, very, very good analysis. And I think you're all familiar with these reports, the MAPS report, the UNECE third performance of environmental performance report, et cetera. So the government's recognition of these issues, I think is why you have a green economy strategy, and why it's taken the measures it has of a reform towards greening. I think what's needed now, and we try to emphasize in the paper, is implementation, and implementation in doing so to really see beyond the various parts of the system, parts of the problem, and to pay attention to the system as a whole, which is really, the different parts of the economy and the environment interlinked, codependent, in a circular fashion. The economy does operate in a circular fashion with the environment at the moment, just not yet a clean green circular one. I think that's incentivized and that's regulated by good policy, and I think that's what we're after in the recommendations that we make in the paper. In addition to the green economy strategy, climate change policy, and various sectoral policies, which are at least referring to, I think, if not yet implementing green, there are some strong foundations on which we can take some inspiration to build a green economy. I think first, the market reforms that began in 2017, which has really reinvigorated economic growth. The World Bank has called this, hailed it as Uzbekistan's unique opportunity. Many reforms already in place, many still to come. Second, I think the growing evidence that green can translate into more growth and more jobs than doing things in a non-green manner. Some of you have heard, and I think we included as an annex in the paper we've prepared of this Cambridge econometrics piece from the We Mean Business Coalition, which illustrates that countries that adopt green economy plans will boost income, boost employment and GDP better than those that don't, better than those that adopt traditional stimulus measures. Third, the rapidly declining price of renewable energy, which we see on this graph. And I think it's Bloomberg New Energy that's come up with the statistic from the last 10 years, 11 years or so, that the levelized cost, as we see here, that's the average lifetime cost of equipment per megawatt hour of electricity generated, of solar, of offshore wind, of onshore wind, fell by 87, 62, and 56% respectively. So this is quite a dramatic movement, and I think something that really needs to be taken advantage of, especially in a country like Uzbekistan with plenty of sunshine. Fourth, the promise of green finance, and here I'll spend a little time. According again to Bloomberg, the combined issued volume of green bonds, social bonds, sustainability-linked loans, green loans, topped some, I think, 2 trillion or so is the Bloomberg number. And here we're talking about a whole range of financing for both public and private green investments, including environmental goods and services. That includes water management or protection of biodiversity and landscapes, prevention, minimization, and compensation of damages to the environment and to climate, such as energy efficiency. The financing of public policies that encourage implementation of environmental and environmental damage mitigation, for example, feed-in tariffs for renewable energies, etc. And then finally, components of the financial system that deal specifically with green investments, Green Climate Fund, financial instruments for green investments like green bonds and structured green funds. So this is very important. So going forward, what needs to happen? First, I think, is an adherence to key principles for greening, and we outline these in the papers, and I think but I think they're fairly well reflected in the green economy strategy of the government. And the specific policy recommendations which follow out of here are also outlined in the paper. And I'll just go through just a quick review of most of them. I think we have time. Screen all elements of a stimulus package, build shovel-ready sustainable infrastructure projects. Don't be left with stranded assets. We've heard a lot about that today. Increase ambition of long-term environmental objectives, support development of green finance, incentives for producers, importers, and exporters for green, reduce environmentally harmful subsidies, tie investment decisions for infrastructure to integrating environmental or climate mitigation and adaptation criteria, strengthen regulations on environment, enhance the use of pricing instruments, green procurement, eco-labeling, policies that do no harm to the most vulnerable, and in fact, policies that strengthen the ability of the most vulnerable to engage in the green economy is very important. Increase capacities to assess and disclose climate change and other environmental related financial information, and then provide support for reskilling and training. So these are detailed in the paper more pointedly and specifically. And then, of course, most of the paper, I think the most interesting part of the paper, and perhaps the newest part of the paper, is detail on key sector policy recommendations. A lot of this is also in the UNECE paper, but some of it is new. I think with a particular focus on the need to reduce energy intensity, the focus on renewables, improving water management, agricultural market innovation, enhancing human resources, especially to take advantage of the digital revolution, which we've also talked about, and the youth dividend, which I've not heard anything about just yet, but quite important, both as an opportunity, but something that needs to be looked at closely in terms of jobs and job security for youths coming out of school. So how to implement much of this agenda on the sectoral side? There are many good sectoral policies, new ones that have come out. How to implement them is sort of the bulk, much of the bulk of the report. Finally, the report makes a suggestion that we've also heard for a national interagency Green Economy Council, and through it, as an initial jumping off point, the development of a roadmap and investment strategy. UNDP, I know for its part, is ready to work with the council, provide advisory and coordinating support, along with long-term technical assistance, which would include mobilization of resources, financial resources from donors, from investors, strengthening capacity of member agencies and relevant stakeholders. And really critically aligning what you've got in the strength of both the National Green Economy Strategy and the National Climate Strategy. So thank you for that. Over.
Thank you very much, Mr. Randall, for your innovative presentation. So it's really important for us to see the system at whole, and very attractive and visual pictures with elephant. because a lot of work has been done to assess the problems at the global level and the impact on in Uzbekistan. And to see a whole system, it's very important for us, because our focus is economy development, not what we have as asset, natural resources. So thank you so much to emphasizing on this part of the whole system. Thank you. So let's go to the next presenter, Cornelis Brahms, with presentation, Green Recovery from COVID-19 Can Slow Climate Change, Adaptation and Mitigation Measures Recommended in the third Environmental Performance Review of Uzbekistan. So short background of the Mr. Cornelis. He has studied chemistry and microbiology at the University of Amsterdam and chemical technology at Twente University. He has been working in different environmental sectors like air and water pollution, climate change, waste management, and so on. From 2005 till 2014, he coordinated the Dutch contributions to the EU BREF documents and was a member of several technical working groups at the EU IPPC Bureau in Seville, Spain. So I think it's extremely important, because Mr. Cornelis is expert on the BAT, Best Available Techniques development. Now it's a very crucial point for Uzbekistan and for Central Asia as well. So he is a member of the expert team in the review mission for the third EPR of Uzbekistan, with, as I mentioned before, with a group of the national and international experts. It's a huge, it's documents, has some 500 pages, I suppose. And Mr. Cornelis extract only 25 measures, very important and focused on the today topics. So please, Cornelis Brahms, microphone is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Siklina. I was a member indeed of the team in the review mission for the third environmental performance review of Uzbekistan that started in 2018 and it was published last year. The environmental performance review deals with a period from 2010 to 2018. It covers quite a number of topics, for instance, chapters about the legal and policy framework, about greening the economy, about environmental monitoring, public participation and education, and it addresses also chapters related to air protection, biodiversity, and protected areas, water, waste, and chemicals management. Key chapters in the environmental performance review are climate change adaptation and mitigation, and the participation in international agreements. And finally, it also examines the integration of environmental policy in the energy, the industrial, the transport, the agricultural, the housing, and the health sector. So there are quite a lot of chapters in this EPR. In this sheet, you can see the link to the third environmental performance review of Uzbekistan. In the EPR, there are more than 25 recommendations in different chapters that relate to climate change mitigation and adaptation measures. So I shall not mention them all, but I'll limit myself to highlight the most important ones. In the chapter Greening the Economy, in this slide, the most important measures are the planned phasing out of fossil fuel subsidies. These subsidies are a worldwide problem at the moment. The abundance of fossil energy sources in Uzbekistan could hamper the rationalization of inefficient fossil fuel subsidies, as mentioned in Target 12C of the Sustainable Development Goals. The second bullet, the second recommendation, it covers the need to further limit the water stress that exists, and it will go by raising temperatures. And the third bullet is about the important recommendation in this chapter that without capacity building of skilled officials, you do not get a well-working green public procurement. Then the chapter on climate change. The key measures recommended in this chapter are: first, develop and adopt a law on climate action and overall long-term strategy on climate change adaptation and mitigation. although climate change concerns have been established in sectoral legislation and a number of strategic documents, Uzbekistan still lacks a comprehensive law on climate change. And also it lacks an overall long-term strategy on climate actions. The second bullet. In 2019, Uzbekistan established a national strategy for implementation of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction in 2015-2030. But local risk reduction strategies are still lacking. The next one. The process of preparing a greenhouse gas inventory is not a regular, continuous process in Uzbekistan, which is an obstruction for an effective development of climate change policies and implementation of mitigation and adaptation measures. Additional finance is needed to ensure this process. We heard already a little bit from the previous speakers. The next bullet, sectoral authorities are active in implementing mitigation and adaptation measures, but there is no institution with a clear mandate to steer the climate change action at national level. The lack of coordination is a hindering factor for climate action. And the last bullet on this slide is about the most important measures relevant to climate change currently implemented in the forestry sector are the massive afforestation campaigns in the dried bed of the Aral Sea. Forest plantations and the diversification of planted species are essential in mitigating dust storms and provide economic opportunities. Next one. Proposed measures in the EPR regarding energy efficiency and renewable energy sources have already been mentioned by Mr. Foster, so I shall not repeat them all here. There is a high potential for solar energy in Uzbekistan, and it is very important to develop this, also because of the expected falling cost. We saw this at the presentation of Mr. Purcell. Use of coal-fired power plants, which still takes place in Uzbekistan, should be reduced in the future, and for the part that they are still needed, they should be modernized and technically upgraded. The second recommendation is about residential buildings. The energy efficiency of houses in Uzbekistan is at the moment still 3 times lower than in the most European countries, which mean that with insulation and better maintenance of district heating and other measures, there is a lot to win. Also, application of low carbon technologies like hybrid heat pumps, ventilation, photovoltaic and heat, solar panels, heat networks, cleaner fuels, gas instead of wood and coal. This will help to mitigate, etc. It will mitigate the climate change. There is discussion if it is possible to achieve the necessary greenhouse gas emission reduction goals without the application of nuclear power plants. This is in discussion in many countries, also in Uzbekistan. When a nuclear power plant will be built in Uzbekistan, Uzbekistan should follow the recommendations of the International Atomic Energy Agency to provide the necessary safeguards to reduce environmental and health risk and environmental impact assessment, including a well-organized dialogue with neighboring countries. Very important. Then the measures recommended in the chapters on industry and the environment and on transport and the environment. These are key measures from the chapter on industry or transport. To achieve target 9.4 of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, technology to upgrade the industrial sector to a sustainable level, financial and technical incentives must be applied. Creation of small and medium-sized enterprises focused on green technology has proven to accelerate this upgrade. The second bullet deals with the transport emissions. As road vehicles remain the main source of transport-related carbon dioxide emission. Low-octane fuels pollute more and they are less efficient when burned. So it's necessary to stop the subsidies for lower quality fuels and make the shift to cleaner fuels, more efficient engines and increase in electromobility. And the last bullet describes the recommendation to provide public transport and possibilities for bicycles, as many people in the urban environment still prefer to use their own private cars instead of using public traffic due to lack of accessibility and coverage of residential areas. To achieve the target 11.2 of the Sustainable Development Goals, recently investments have been made, but more policy and action plans are needed to reverse the increase in traffic congestions and air pollution. Also, alternative modes of transport, like electric bicycles, for instance, should be promoted by the construction of safe bike lanes in the cities. The last slide about the measures proposed in the chapters on human settlements and the environment and on health and the environment. First, introduce climate adaptation planning and enhance climate resilience in urban areas and rural settlements. Uzbekistan has not yet developed specific policies for adaptation to climate change and is in the startup phase regarding this approach. At the moment, limited information is available on the expected measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the housing sector. Such measures are indispensable for the country to deliver on global target 11.b of the Sustainable Development Goals. That's about integrated policies and plans towards inclusion, resource efficient mitigation and adaptation to climate change, resilience to disasters, and developing disaster management on all levels in line with the Sendai framework. The last recommendation is slide presented here can be found in the chapter on health and environment of the Environmental Performance Review. Climate change is bringing excessive cardiovascular and respiratory morbidity and mortality, and its impacts are growing. The capacity of the health sector to assess climate change related health status and trends as a basis for planning preventive measures and monitoring of effects is at the moment still insufficient. So Uzbekistan is advancing in emergency preparedness and response systems, but lacks practical experience in disaster risk reduction and prevention, building disaster resilience and instituting effective early warning systems at community at other levels. These were, in my opinion, the most important recommendations of the EPR. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cornelis, for your presentation. It's really important for all government structure, will be important for all government structure in Uzbekistan. It takes time to look through 500 pages because it was very detailed information like current situation and way forward for Uzbekistan. It will be a stable book for government to take right decision and to move to the green economy. Thank you so much to you and your team and UNICEF for their effort. So let's move to the next presentation. So the next presentation will be from the private sector. The title is Greening the Sector of Agriculture. Private sector example come from company Intexno. And Muzaffar Fozilovich Irismetov will be our presenter. He is engineering technologies for intensive production of feed for all types of animals, birds and fish. His position now is developer, engineering, designer of hydroponic systems for growing plants and forage crops. He has experience more than 10 years in the CIS countries, former Soviet countries, in the organization and development of agriculture and animal husbandry, research and implementation of scientific and practical technologies in the field of feed production, development and implementation of vertical and horizontal hydroponic systems. So, Muzaffar Fazilovich, microphone is yours. Please deliver your presentation.
Добрый день всем участникам форума. Благодарю за предоставленную возможность участия в онлайн-форуме «Зеленое восстановление после COVID-19» в Республике Узбекистан. Меня зовут Музафар Ирисметов, я инженер компании Intexno по развитию инновационных технологий в сфере растениеводства и кормовых культур для животноводства. Внедрение экологически инновационного замкнутого цикла водосберегающей и энергосберегающей технологии дает возможность экологически восстановления пастбищ и снижения нагрузки на окружающую среду в целом и получения экологически чистого продукта. Использованный опыт в Каракалпакии при поддержке ПРООН показал, что внедрение технологий во время пандемии COVID-19 стабильное производство кормов в самом животноводческом комплексе показал свою высокую эффективность. Так как животноводство более эффективно, чем растениеводство, в Каракалпакии является главным традиционным приоритетом и источником дохода населения. Социально-экономическая составляющая выражается в образовании до 25 новых рабочих зеленых мест на одном комплексе, в получении возможности дополнительного дохода и увеличения производства в целом, привлечение дополнительной рабочей силы для сбора и заготовки сырья. Это станет для населения показателем эффективности, экологичности, экономичности комплексного производства кормов для всех видов животных, как пример инновационного внедрения зеленых технологий. Водосберегающие технологии позволяют снять нагрузку на пастбище и развивать стойловое животноводство, что дает возможность восстановления и роста зеленого растительного покрова и растения в регионе. Геологическая составляющая замкнутого цикла производства в том, что животные быстро восстанавливаются здоровье. Зависимость от ветеринарных препаратов снижается на 85%. Для полива используется чистая питьевая вода, получаемая на установках обратного осмоса, приготовлена для людей и животных. В результате получаем экологически чистый продукт, получаемый на установке обратного осмоса. Соль используется, остаточная соль используется для приготовления раствора гипохлорита натрия, которым обеззараживается зерно, помещение, инвентарь. Также применяется раствор гипохлорита натрия, помогая предохранять от вирусов, от COVID-19. Имеется возможность передавать такой раствор гипохлорит натрия населению, детским дошкольным учреждениям, школам, медицинским учреждениям для проведения обеззараживающих мероприятий для борьбы с распространением COVID-19. Эффективность комплекса повышает мясомолочную продуктивность животных, расходы на корма снижаются до 50%. На выходе мы получаем стабильный, гарантированный экологически чистый корм круглый год. Данный комплекс заменяет 25 гектаров поливной земли, 350 гектаров естественных пастбищ. С 1 квадратного метра установки мы можем получать до 10 тысяч килограмм гидропонного зеленого корма в год, что заменяет 1 гектар поливной земли, используемый для заготовки кормов. Комплекс по производству 3 видов кормов дает возможность получения главных компонентов рациона. Это сочные зеленые корма, заготовленная витамина травяная мука и производство на месте сахаробелковых жидких кормов. Инновационное, собственное, независимое, стабильное производство кормов дает огромный толчок к развитию животноводства и улучшению социально-экономической ситуации в республике. Отдельно хочу поблагодарить ПРООН и руководство Республики Узбекистан за поддержку и внедрение энерговодосберегающих технологий в Республике Узбекистан. Спасибо за внимание.
Спасибо большое, Музафар Фазилович, за вашу презентацию. Очень четко, кратко, по делу. Сразу видно, что вот вы деловой человек. И я думаю, что такие инновационные идеи, которые вы уже сейчас как бы начали и продолжаете, развиваете уже в течение 10 лет, я думаю, что как раз-таки вот сидят сегодня представители министерства, будут поддерживаться, потому что сектор сельского хозяйства, он является вторым после промышленности, после энергетического сектора, вторым сектором вот, по значимости в Республике Узбекистан. Спасибо вам большое за презентацию.
Спасибо.
Так, ну у нас по повестке все 4 спикера выступили, и сейчас у нас есть время, где-то около 15 минут для вопросов и ответов. Я хотела бы попросить Азамата, я видела 4 вопроса от аудитории. Я думаю, что это очень важно сейчас, что we have a feedback from the audience, and let's start asking to the audience because I think it's also very important not to discuss between us, between speakers, also some feedback from audience, it's important. Azamat, can you help me with the questions?
Sure. Коллеги, я попробую зачитать вопросы в порядке их
Да,
получения.
там были
по мере
вопросы,
возможности.
где заместителю министра я видела два, да?
Да, был первый вопрос господину Абдиназарову. Вопрос был такого характера. Каким образом осуществляем в настоящее время перевод энергоинтенсивных отраслей, к примеру, производства строительных материалов с природного газа на уголь, согласуется со стратегией зеленого развития? Это был первый вопрос. Должен ли я продолжить?
Господин заместитель министра.
Да, с вашего позволения, значит...
Еще раз, да, прочитать вопрос?
Нет, понятный вопрос.
Прочитайте,
Значит,
пожалуйста, Замат.
вопрос понятен.
Хорошо.
Значит, на самом деле в строительстве, то есть в секторе производства строительных материалов у нас очень много, значит, технологий по, значит, сухому методу, допустим, если мы говорим о цементе, да, которые очень энергоемкие и тому подобное, значит, ну, предприятия. В основном, значит, перевод на уголь, то есть этих же энергоемких предприятий, но при этом, чтобы эти, значит, производства были как бы более энергоэффективными. То есть, допустим, по углю тоже имеются новые как бы технологии, энергоэффективные и тому подобное. Но при этом хотелось бы отметить, что да, переход к зеленой экономике говорит, что то есть стратегия перехода к зеленой экономике предусматривает снижение как бы углеводородоемкости, но думаю, что все понимают, что все равно там диверсификация источников, как один из источников уголь, она будет еще присутствовать во всех экономиках, не только в Узбекистане, в экономике Узбекистана, а и еще других более развитых экономик тоже. Соответственно, то есть мы постепенно, конечно, будем насчет этого думать, и я думаю, что вот именно policy brief, который подготовлен Undp, и на основе этого, который мы предполагаем подготовить, значит, новый нормативно-правовой акт, поможет нам принять конкретные меры по данному направлению тоже. Спасибо.
Господин Абдиназаров, благодарю за ответ.
Думаю, заместитель министра дал довольно-таки как бы такой обширный ответ и ответил на вот поставленный вопрос. Спасибо. А второй вопрос там был?
Да, с вашего позволения зачитаю второй вопрос. Спасибо.
Да.
Вопрос был от Луизы. Существует ли практика внедрения зеленых способов выплаты долга? Уточнение, в частности, внедрение правительством практики сокращения долга компаниям, которые внедрят зеленые экономические практики и методы ведения бизнеса. Есть ли подобные примеры и как это работает? Коллеги?
Значит,
я думаю, это вопрос.
Ну, по части, ну, я постараюсь ответить, если у нас есть финансисты и международные эксперты, наверное, они еще дополнят, но то, что касается значит, зеленого финансирования, то есть по данному направлению тоже вот мы услышали очень хорошие как бы рекомендации, направления, но в данный момент пока как бы такого механизма конкретного для предприятий зеленых, ну, которые применили зеленое финансирование, нет, но при этом согласно закону о, значит, возобновляемых источниках энергии предусмотрены льготы в качестве освобождения от налога на имущество, льготы от освобождения налога на землю, который предоставляется, значит, физическим и юридическим лицам на тех территориях, в которых расположены именно источники получения как бы от возобновляемых источников энергии. И, соответственно, по мере того, как мы будем прорабатывать привлечение зеленого финансирования, естественно, государство продумает и предусмотрит определенные преференции и меры поддержки для таких предприятий. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое, Бабур Каландарович. Maybe some addition from our experts, from the Randall and Cornelis. Could you add something? So what is what is situation in your countries, or maybe you have international experience? How is working government with the private sector, which implemented green technology, or is subsidized and taxes?
I think, colleagues, we understand that we have a session tomorrow specifically focused on green financing. So I'll let those tomorrow speak to that. But in terms of the sort of green financing that is brought mostly to the public sector by the donors, I just wanted to mention this sort of speaks mostly to my experience at the UN in trying to sort of consolidate efforts around what different donors, including the UN, the bilateral donors, the IFIs, the World Bank, ADB, et cetera, are doing in country. You know, we're trying to, I think, be more both efficient in order to act at greater scale for greater impact, right? And I think this takes a certain degree of getting down into the trenches a little bit on, you know, integrating our actions practically, operationally, layering them and sequencing them. And I think when we talk about money and, you know, indebtedness and the efficient use of money, I think we really should focus on, you know, in addition to other things such as the alignment of spending around, you know, the sectoral policies that you've got in place and how that spending is done and interacts with spending in other sectors. I really think we have to look at alignment of the monies coming in to the public sector from the donor community. And it's probably an area that is ripe for attention by this council. And I'm sure it'll be part of the terms of reference, perhaps, and Matilda can speak more to this. I'm not familiar with where that is, but I just wanted to mention the importance of this, you know, given Uzbekistan as something of the darling of the donors because of its commitment, you know, to this agenda and to the opportunities present. I think this is an important issue.
Maybe to add something to this answer, it is also very important, I think, to convince people to use renewables and to help them if they cannot afford it by means of subsidies. All kinds of subsidies are possible, I think. For instance, in the Netherlands, where I live, there is an institute that takes care of all the subsidies for people who want to insulate their homes and that kind of things. And you can get a lot of money back. And that could be developed also for poor countries and in countries where this is until now not have the money for that. So it's not, it's the meaning that people are not going to pay more for their use of energy.
Okay, thank you so much for addition. Thank you to Randall and Cornelis for your additions. So next question from the audience.
Thank you, Zafira. Colleagues, before I go over other remaining questions, I just want to remind that we have about 7 minutes left for the session. So if we don't manage to address all questions within the session, we still will follow up with you afterwards. So the next question is from Mr. Zarif Jumayev, and it's about how to overcome the public opposition to reducing fossil fuel subsidies. How to ensure that the vulnerable people are protected from the increase in prices on energy. Thank you.
With your permission, so it's concerning fossil fuel subsidies. In order to exclude fossil fuel subsidies, it's very needed. It's important that we'll have like a tariff reform for this tariff reform of this, I mean, energy resources. But at the same time, in post-COVID situation, supporting by government vulnerable people is more important than any kind of this economic reforms. This is one thing, and the second thing is as you are all aware that in 29th of December, when His Excellency Mr. President gave a speech to Oli Majlis and to the people of Uzbekistan, he talked about establishing natural gas and electricity market in Uzbekistan, and this will the government is working on this issue, and soon will canvas how to say strategy and the concept of this market, how it's going to be, and so on. But at the same time, Ministry of Finance is currently is implementing, so it started already, using a social register. This social register is about to, I would say, to cover all vulnerable people and so on, and to make the subsidies. So we understand that subsidies should be, how to say, addressed to the right people, but this kind of issues, especially during pandemic time and after COVID-19 recovery period, is very, how to say, very tricky question. So that's why. I think we'll come to this point very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the answer, for the detailed answer. So it's a clear picture. And I'd like to say that Uzbekistan is an attractive country compared with all Central Asia, because they use this fossil fuel basically on the big percent use natural gas, more than 80% of as fuel. So it's compared, for example, with Kazakhstan, because Kazakhstan is used as fossil fuel, oil and coal and so on. So I think it's a good position to start to moving to the increasing portion of the renewable energy in the energy balance of the country. Thank you for your answer. So yeah, so it's complete. Our question from the audience, or
Zulfira, let me address just one more question, please.
Okay.
And with this, I suggest to finish the session.
Yeah. Okay.
And this will be addressed to everyone in the panel, I assume. The question is from Tatiana, and it says, я буду говорить на русском. Вопрос от Татьяны, и вопрос звучит так. Как гражданское общество вовлечено в процесс перехода на низкоуглеродную экономику и зеленое восстановление после пандемии в Узбекистане? Благодарю.
So, Juanse, Deputy Minister.
So on this issue, there are two presidential decrees. Может, на русском, да, или как?
Да, говорите на русском, мы же переводим. Конечно.
Хорошо, да, в принципе, имеется два постановления президента по повышению энергоэффективности, значит, целом экономики, 47-79 последний, да, который предусматривает именно как бы предоставление субсидий для населения, который устанавливает именно солнечные панели и значит эффективные газогорелки и установки там как воды, да, то есть правительством как бы принимаются все меры для поддержки, чтобы население переходило на зеленую экономику, то есть на renewable energy, на возобновляемые источники энергии, но при этом я думаю, что именно старт, вот этот форум, который сегодня мы, то есть вот Undp с помощью Undp организовали, он дает очень хороший, создает очень хорошую платформу для вовлечения именно ну, во-первых, здесь вот только сейчас Музафар Ака, вот как представитель частного сектора, представил свою презентацию, да, то есть вовлекать население и, конечно же, частные лица в этот процесс. Ну, конечно, я думаю, что именно этот вопрос будет стоять у нас на повестке дня первым, чтобы больше вовлекать наше население вот именно по переходу в зеленую экономику, внедрение больше зеленых технологий. Спасибо.
Спасибо большое, Бабур Каландарович. Сегодня вас просто атаковали вопросами, но видно, что аудитория как раз-таки вот представлена и частью из Узбекистана, и гражданское общество, и малый бизнес, и поэтому была такая заинтересованность хорошая. Я смотрю, у нас уже по времени мы практически 6 часов, но я хотела бы, если вы дадите мне такую возможность, I have one specific question to our international speakers using this platform. Because I think it's a crucial, when I look through two documents, policy brief and EPR, so we have a lack knowledge on implementation of SDG, especially SDG 12, target 12.2 and 12.3 concerning to natural asset base. On my ass is a picture with elephant, so don't see part, see the whole picture, don't see part. So it's a good picture to reflect current situation in Uzbekistan and in our countries, Central Asia countries. We have a good indicators and statistical data in economic activities, but lack of information of natural asset base. So what you can recommend us? I look through this SDGs task 12.2 and 12.3 in Russian and in English. So it's not easy wording, and so it's a lack understanding, and we don't have statistical data, but it's a crucial point for us, because if we say regarding 20.2, it's achieve the sustainable management and efficient use of natural resources. It's a crucial point for all our countries. And task 12.3 concerning the food waste management. So reduce food losses along production and supply chain, including post-harvest losses. So it's important for Uzbekistan and for other countries. What do you say and what do you recommend for us? Thank you. Maybe Cornelis and then Randall also.
Well, I already told about subsidies that you can organize for poor people. I think it's important. For the food waste, well, this is a problem everywhere in the world, I think. It might be a better organization of the food distribution. And there is a problem at the moment in the world, that also in the Western world, that there is a lot of food wasted, and it going to the so-called food banks for people who have not much money. But this is not a final solution, I think. So I think better organization is I think the most important for that.
Yeah, I mean, on my part, as an ag guy, I would just focus again on sort of the priorities in the ag sector. I mean, food waste, of course, is important, but the incentives for farmers, I think, to move away from cotton is huge, and what the government can do there. Also rural infrastructure, right? And this again is the government's job. Eliminating, import duties on green technology, of course, key. So I think there does need to be sort of, there are 1,000 things that need to get done, but I think it's important to prioritize. And again, maybe this is something that this council can sort of help you do. Over.
Okay, thank you. I think we have to find some methodology for calculation and so on. Okay, thank you so much. So our session coming over, and I'd like to say thank you so much for our excellent experts on this session. Thank you so much for government of Uzbekistan, for our deputy minister. He was at the end of the session with us and answered a lot of questions came from the audience. Thank you. And thank you so much for our interpreters, and good luck. And I wish all of you success in your activities and going to the green and sustainable future. So thank you.
Ms. Zikrina, thank you very much for your moderation. Before we move on to the closing remarks section, there are just a few things to mention. First is that the policy brief that was presented by Mr. Randall Pearsall, it's ready, and its executive summary will be published online. And please check the chat box for the link to our forum website, where it will be available soon. And the second thing is just to give us like a few minutes of a break and some stretch time. We will run a video right now, and then we'll move on to closing section. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Azam. Thank you so much. The Deputy Minister.
Colleagues, can I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, so now we are moving to the closing session. And on behalf of one of the co-organizers, by the way, my name is Sarangorad Narakcha, and I'm the regional advisor from Environment Division of UNEC, and one of the co-organizers. And I would like to congratulate everyone for successful completion of the sessions and the wealth of interesting discussions that we had today. It was a great opportunity and privilege for us, for UNEC, to be a co-organizer of this very important event. Today, many ideas have been discussed and recommendations have been put forward. We all understand that the measures in recovery plans need to aim at delivering not only economic prosperity, but also at addressing environmental challenges. This has been said also by many of the speakers. And to that end, economic and environmental cooperation is very important to achieve a resilient, sustainable, and inclusive recovery. Without attempting to summarize all what has been said, let me touch upon on two issues. The first area which I would like to underline is on water management and efficient use of water resources. And this was already being highlighted by speakers, and this is also one of the priority directions under the policy brief. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown that the unsustainable use of natural resources may increase the risk of further pandemics or outbreaks of waterborne infections, while adding to complex environmental risks through cascading impacts. And sustainable and efficient use of water resources can build resilience through its links to many spheres, to climate, biodiversity, infrastructure, tourism, transport, trade, and energy. Therefore, the need to move towards the principles of integrated water resource management and policy coherence, cross-sectoral cooperation and coordination is of utmost importance. To achieve these sustainable water management ambitions, we stand ready to assist in establishing a national policy dialogue on integrated water resource management within the framework of ongoing regional program funded by the European Union. The establishment of such a policy dialogue was also recommended by the Environmental Performance Review. Secondly, I wish to highlight the importance of systematic and effective environmental assessment of recovery initiatives. The application of instruments such as strategic environmental assessment provides a robust legal and institutional framework to help countries to build back better. A CA enables countries to consider health risks and mitigation measures for pandemics as part of their planning processes and enhancing socioeconomic conditions. And we are already working with the State Committee of Ecology and Environmental Protection in the past few years to strengthen the legislative framework, and we are very pleased to continue providing this assistance further. Last but not least, taking this opportunity on behalf of UNEC, I would like to invite you to participate in the Regional Forum on Sustainable Development, which is gathering on 17th and 18th of March, and which will be preceded by a series of roundtable discussions, specifically dedicated to discuss sustainable and resilient recovery from the pandemic. It will be very useful to share the outcomes of today's discussions and from tomorrow under the forum, and to share experiences of Uzbekistan on post-pandemic recovery with other member states in the region. So on this note, please allow me once again to thank all participants for your valuable contribution today, and I wish you all the best. So, as I understood, now I am handing over to Monsieur François Bugeaud, Head of Cooperation from the Delegation of the European Union in Uzbekistan. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sarah. Dear colleague, esteemed participant, it has been a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and I think we had a very rich afternoon and session. Okay, so what to say more? You know, we can say for sure the COVID-19 crisis has reminded us that international cooperation is needed to resolve collective challenges that do not respect national borders. To fight the pandemic, international partners and governments across the globe have joined the forces to collaborate on research, statistics, and support to the citizens. We should apply this sense of urgency and cross-border cooperation also to our fight against climate change. The post-COVID economic recovery and the transition to a socially just, resilient, and climate-neutral economy can and should go hand by hand. We welcome the government of Uzbekistan's strong commitment to the implementation of the national strategy on transition to a green economy. And we hope that future efforts will be done to align economic growth policy with sustainable development goals, Paris Agreement, and internationally agreed biodiversity goals. We also support the government's effort in increasing public funds and attracting external investment in greening the economy. Equally important is to strengthen the support to the private sector and civil society through appropriate regulation and instruments to encourage them to develop products and services that drive resilient and circular economy, and most importantly, create more jobs. The effort for rapid growth should not compromise the need of present and future generations. In Uzbekistan, 60% of the population are below 30 years of age. This is enormous. And we know by experience of the previous month that young people are almost the most vulnerable to social and economic consequences of the pandemic. More than a half of country's population should not be just be receiver of the government reform, but rather be agent of change. The year of youth support and health promotion, which was quoted by the Deputy Minister, is a great opportunity to strengthen the leadership of youth and make their voice heard across all policy, contributing to a green recovery. Ladies and gentlemen, I have been following today the discussion really with a great interest, and I think we have discussed and gathered a number of important recommendations and conclusions. Just to name a few of them. First, green recovery required a strategic and coordinated planning. It goes without saying, but maybe it's better by saying it. Very important, between the green agenda and growth, there is no room for a trade-off. To ensure the necessary synergy, creating coherence in resource management across the sectors is absolutely important. International and regional partnership can provide many opportunities and facilitate the process towards solution to global challenges if the government of Uzbekistan continue exploring the new opportunity for benefiting from and joining such partnership. Among these partnerships, let me quote the recently launched Global Alliance for Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency. Dear colleagues, let me conclude by saying that effort for sustainable development and climate neutral economy can be successful, you have understood it, only by all of us working together. It has been a great pleasure to participate in a constructive dialogue today, and I invite you to follow the further discussion on green financing instruments and digital transformation in the private sector during tomorrow's continuation of this forum. Those two topics, I think, are key for complementing what we have discussed today. I believe that the European Union, in the sense of Team Europe, which means European Union, Member States, EIB, EBRD, and all the international development partners are devoted to continue and enhance the cooperation with the government of Uzbekistan, the private sector, and the civil society in order to transfer the commitment to a green recovery from the strategy and forum into everyday policies and practice. Only concrete implementation will create a change. No more words, but actions. Qatar Ahmad. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Francois. Very, very good points and brief. I think according to the agenda, I'm to take over, and I'm doing that as one of the co-organizers. I wish to how to make it brief, but reflective of the very rich discussion. We have a great discussion today. I join to the co-organizers in appreciating the exchange we had. And what we've heard was a universal reaffirmation of the importance of promoting green development. That was a clear message. It was very promising to see the emphasis, the commitment of the government of Uzbekistan on promoting green development that drives innovation, resilience, and systems thinking. We are very happy that the policy brief that was prepared ahead of the forum was useful and was guiding the discussion, or triggered the discussion in some way. And we are very pleased that the sectors that have been presented or highlighted in the policy brief, key sectors such as energy, construction, water, agriculture, green financing, have a strategic importance in promoting green economic development, and will be guiding our future joint work on development of policies around those sectors. Now, one of the issues that are important to flag is that we have did an effort together to summarize the key recommendations voiced today, and we would like to present to your kind attention, to everyone's, a statement of intent that is now available online on the events page. On behalf of the organizers, I will flag only few of its key points. First, as we've heard throughout, cross-sectoral cooperation and systems thinking are the key factors to achieve strategic priorities for the benefit of green recovery and development in Uzbekistan, but also in Central Asia. So more efforts around towards coordinated actions and applying the international experience tailored to the needs of the country and the context are important. Second, that green economy requires a holistic whole of the government approach to mainstream the principles of building forward better into the national policies, but also it requires for an inclusive or bottom-up approach. Therefore, civil society, academia, micro and small enterprises, youth shall be given the opportunity to be the actors of change. And because they bring in the innovation, the behavioral changes, and the transformative impact towards resilient, climate neutral, and green society and growth. And then the fourth point of the statement is that to turn into practice the joint conclusions the participants recommend to the government of Uzbekistan to entrust additional function to the existing interagency council on promoting and implementing a green economy in Uzbekistan. That council was established based on the 2019 National Strategy on Transition to Green Economy. Couple of additional functions could be potentially added to that council to support the decision-making process to advance the green economy in a coordinated, complex manner. Second, to create a unified platform for discussing the strategies and policies that benefit the transition to green economy without doing harm to environment and society. Third, to enhance the capacity of national stakeholders in implementation of best practices and development of a new innovative, climate-friendly and inclusive solutions. And fourth, to support the participation of Uzbekistan in regional cooperation mechanisms and knowledge exchange on issues concerning sustainable development. The representatives, final point, the representatives of the international and bilateral organizations are willing to provide assistance in promoting practical solutions in green economic development and recovery, and shall be also engaged and consulted by that interagency council. The development partners represented at this forum are ready to provide further support and assistance to our national partners and to the Ministry of Economic Development in operationalizing the strategy to transition to a green economy in Uzbekistan and establishing of that type of effective institutional mechanisms for coordination in monitoring and evidence-based policymaking. On behalf of United Nations Development Programme, let me reiterate strong commitment to support the government in developing more ambitious climate action to achieve its emission reduction targets, but also the readiness to cooperate for development on a detailed roadmap and investment strategy for transition towards a green economy. So these were the key points that came that I could have made in a very brief, and I'm sure that many are missing, but it will come into the proceeds of the meeting. Before closing today's session, let me ask the Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction, the Deputy Minister, Mr. Bobur Abdunazarov, if he wishes to share his views of the forum and the discussion of today. Mr. Abdunazarov, I think you are still online with us.
Yeah, thank you, Mrs. Dimoska. And first of all, I would like to thank all our speakers and the guests and our participators. So thank you very much for your time, for your precious time. And thank you very much for those ideas, recommendations, and this novelty and all these new technologies and new processes you shared with us. And I think so together with you all, so we can create a green future, more resilient and more, I would say, bright future for our children. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A very good summary of it. Ultimately, everything that we do is for the future generations. So let me finish by thanking all co-organizers of today's forums. Such a contribution during the preparation of the event and the conduct of the event. Big thanks to all participants. We had it from different institutions across the country, but also from outside of the country. For spending the time, engaging and spending the time with us. So let us remind ourselves that today is the second day of the forum. It will start at 10 o'clock Tashkent time. We will have two important sessions, one on green financing instruments. As I see, there is an expectation and interest of that for that session. And the other is about enabling environment for the digital transformation in the private sector. Again, a topic that has been a number of times raised today. So we look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. And in the meantime, have a good evening. Katar Ahmad to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye, Rahman.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.